Good morning, everyone. My name is Jonathan Lester, and I'm the chairman of the General Scrutiny meeting that will commence now. Before I start the business of the meeting, I will go to each committee member to confirm that they can hear and be heard. It is a legal requirement for me to do so. Please advise me at once if at any time during the meeting you experience any technical difficulties that prevent you from hearing or being heard. So if you could verbally confirm that you are able to hear me, I will confirm in response that I can hear you. First, Councillor Bowes.
Good morning, Chair. I can confirm I can see and hear you clearly.
Thank you. Councillor Barry Durkin.
Good morning. Yes, I can hear you and see you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Jenny Hewitt.
Thank you, Chair. I can see and hear you.
Thank you. And Councillor Louis Stark.
Good morning, Chair. Yes, I can hear and see you.
And welcome to the committee. And finally, Councillor William Wilding.
Yes, Chair, I can see and hear you. Thank you.
I have been advised of the following councillors are also present. Councillor Gemma Davis, Cabinet Member for Commissioning, Procurement and Assets.
I'm glad you struggle with it as well. Yes, so I can see and hear you, Chair. Good morning.
Thank you, and it's great that you're here. Councillor Hitchener, the Leader of the Council, he will be attending at a later stage, so I will confirm when he attends. Councillor Paul Simons, formerly a member of this committee and the chairperson of the Task and Finish Group for the Waste Management Strategic Review, whose report we will be hearing shortly.
Yes, I can see and hear you. Thank you.
Thank you. Also present is Richard Ball, the Director for Economy and Place, Ben Boswell, the Head of Environment, Climate, Emergency and Waste Services, Victoria Eaton, Senior Planning Officer, Johnny Hughes, Senior Project Manager, Andrew Lovegrove is not here, Nicola Percival is here, Kevin Singleton, Kenton Vegas and Mark Willamont. Okay, is there anyone else I've overlooked or not?
Yes, Chair.
Sorry, Councillor Bartlett, distinguished member of the Task and Finish Group. You're very welcome, and I understand that you can only be here for the first item. The Council is videoing and audio streaming this meeting live on the internet and making an official recording. The recording forms part of the public record of the meeting. Please note that it is a legal requirement that every member attending the virtual meeting is able to hear and, when practicable, see and be heard, and when practicable, be seen by the other members in attendance and the public watching. So I ask that you could please have your audio switched on, and where you're able to do so, also have your video enabled. Can I also remind members to ensure that where available to use your handsets whilst listening and speaking during the meeting. This will ensure that the audio feed is of the highest possible quality and the background noise is significantly reduced. Virtual meetings are new to many of us, and there are some additional points for members of committees and officers to be aware of. As part of the meeting etiquette and in line with our normal committee practices, all microphones apart from mine will be placed on mute at the start and during the meeting. I will run through the agenda in the customary way. When you wish to speak, please use the hand button against your name in the participants list, which should be on the right of your screens. I will then invite you to speak in order of the hands being raised. Please do not raise your physical hand, as I do not want to miss anyone who may wish to speak. Please ensure that all mobile devices are out of the way, switched off, put on mute, whatever you decide, but so that they're not going to disrupt the meeting. Electronic voting will be used at this meeting. You will be asked to use the electronic polls to vote and to confirm the meeting and agree recommendations. When the poll appears on the screen, please select an option and press submit. If the poll does not appear on your screens, please access the poll icon at the foot of your screen in Zoom. If you are unable to vote, please raise your virtual hand, and if for any reason an electronic poll cannot be undertaken, or if the outcome if the outcome is unclear, then I will ask each committee member in turn to confirm their voting verbally. I request that other attendees to avoid interacting with the system during the vote and only to close off any polling screens once the vote has been carried out. And we're joined by Councillor Hitchener, Leader of the Council. Welcome and good morning. We will now proceed with the meeting, and I would like to, it says in my script, Councillor Wilding, but it's actually Councillor Louis Stark who is going to now represent, replace Councillor Simons. But as we've discussed, Councillor Simons is present here because he's the chairman of the Task and Finish group. I would just like to say to him, thank you very much for his help on the Scrutiny Committee and also for his chairmanship of the Task and Finish group. He's a very valued member of the council and has used his thoughtful insights on many occasions in our committees. And so we wish him well, even though he's no longer on the committee. Do we have any other name substitutes?
None, Chairman.
Item 3, declarations of interests. Please indicate by raising your virtual hand if you wish to declare a Schedule 1 or Schedule 2 or any declarable interest, and I will then call each councillor in turn. No declarations of interests. Then we go to item 4, which is the minutes of the last meeting, which seems like a long time ago now, the 20th of January 2020. No matters of accuracy have been notified to the monitoring officer. Can I ask Democratic Services whether the electronic voting system is ready and to confirm the number of eligible voting committee members for this poll?
Right, thank you, Chair. For non-voting members in attendance today, you'll be moved briefly into the breakout room so that you're properly excluded from the vote. You will need to click the join button that will come up on your screen momentarily to join the room, and you'll be automatically returned once the voting process is concluded. Who hasn't gone?
I haven't voted, but I haven't been able to see the voting thing come up, and there's no poll button apparently at the bottom of the screen at the moment.
I don't think it's been activated yet. Okay, right. I think we're in a position now to do the electronic voting.
So, Chairman, there are 5 attendees eligible to vote, and they're able to vote now.
I haven't got the option to vote, I'm afraid.
Sarah, we need to make, there we go, yeah.
There we are, okay.
Sorry, just to recap, Chair, there are 6 members eligible to vote, and they may vote now.
Yep.
Thank you. All votes have been cast, so I'll return everyone to the main room and then confirm the outcome of that. Thank you, Chair. I can confirm that all votes have been cast and the result is 5 in favour and 1 abstention.
Thank you very much. Right, next item on the agenda is agenda item 5, questions from members of the public, and no questions have been received. So moving swiftly on to item 6, agenda item 6, questions from members of the council, and no questions have been received. Therefore, if we are all in agreement, which we are, we're going to swap the agenda items around now. So the agenda item 7 will now be the task and review group report on the waste management review. And before I hand over to the chairman of the task and finish group, I would just want to make one point, which I think is extremely important, is that throughout the COVID crisis, our bins have been emptied and the services have been provided relentlessly as if nothing has happened. And I would just like to pay a special thank you to all of those involved in the waste management services who've carried on. It's one of those key critical services that we would definitely miss within days if it did not operate. And so my thanks, and I'm sure the committee will equally share their thanks for that continuing service, which is highly appreciated and absolutely necessary. Secondly, I would like to thank all of those on the task and finish group for their excellent work, and we're going to discuss the report now, but that was quite a challenge, and most of the work was done under the lockdown conditions, which can't have been easy. So I would just like to thank everyone for such a comprehensive report, and especially thank the chairman as well. And lastly, I'd just like to wish Kenton Vegas all the very best. An outstanding member of the team, and I know that you've done a sterling job for this council and you will be missed. But we're not going to let you go without asking you some really interesting questions. So thank you. So, Councillor Simons, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. And also just very quickly, thanks to all the members of the committee for the support and indulgence they've given me during my time on general scrutiny. But I've absolutely no doubt that Councillor Stark will be a very worthy successor. I think, again, I would like to add my thanks to the working group members and also to Kenton and Nicola. As you say, Chairman, it's been a challenging period. We had planned a lot of site visits and various other things which simply weren't able to take place, but we have nonetheless had extremely constructive and extensive debate on the issues. You'll see from the main report, obviously the context we're working with is we have our collection and disposal contracts are expiring at the end of 23, beginning of 24, which might sound like a long time away in in terms of day-to-day business, but is frankly the blink of an eye in terms of public sector procurement. We also have the national strategy, which is referenced in some detail in the document, and of course all our existing climate change commitments and aspirations to improve our performance on carbon emissions. So that's the kind of general context. The fact that we have the two contracts expiring actually provides a massive opportunity for us to improve our recycling performance and obviously reduce both financial and carbon costs arising from the service. There are a number of key areas in the report, which the report brings out, where we are out of step with current best practice and what will become policy in the new strategy. For example, we've got no separate food waste collection, and our garden waste green sacks currently are collected commingled as part of the domestic waste collection service. And there are some other anomalies which we need to address. And as Chairman's obviously already pointed out, this is a key service. It provided to all homes and has a massive reputational impact for us as an organisation in terms of its effectiveness. And clearly we need to ensure the sort of smooth running we've experienced through COVID and prior to that continues. It's obviously a complex service. It's not just about emptying a few bins, and that therefore leads to the number of recommendations in the report. We did discuss whether some of them could be prioritised or curtailed, but frankly, it's not an option. They're all key recommendations, and that just gives a sense of the scope of this service. We're obviously focusing at this point on the collection systems rather than disposal routes. So there's nothing about energy from waste, anaerobic digestion, all those sorts of things. But that is consistent both with the government strategy, which focuses on being clear about your collection options first, and just kind of common sense and service development. You need to decide how you're going to do something in terms of the customer facing end. And you'll see the key philosophy that's really the thread throughout the report, which has been a very strong theme from all the members of the working group, has been that we should see what we're collecting as resource, not waste. And that should, in our view, very strongly be the ambition for this council and for this service. There are a number of opportunities, particularly household recycling centres. We think they're a key underutilised resource stroke opportunity in the current service arrangements. Obviously, I'm sure you'll have all seen, I've forgotten the name of the programme, where a woman goes along and scavenges things from household waste sites across the country and turns them into useful things. Building on that kind of philosophy, we think is a massive opportunity to really reinforce that message that what goes to household recycling centres is not waste, it just needs repurposing. In terms of scale, I mean, the current contract has run for 25 years at £15 million a year. The new contract will certainly be a procurement well in excess of £100 million, and depending on the length of contract we go for, could be as much as £250 million if with extensions. So we absolutely have to get this right. And a key issue for me, having run these kinds of services and procurements in the past, is that we cannot afford to scrimp on our resources at this point. So you'll see the report does try and hammer home the need that currently we have a massive risk with essentially one officer responsible for all of this, and we do need to make sure we've got the right people in place, both to get us to the point of procurement, to the go live, and also probably to see us through the transition into what the new service looks like. If we scrimp at this point, we'll almost certainly end up paying through the nose for consultants to come in and bail us out at the 11th hour, which is no good for anybody. And it is, as I said earlier on, a very tight timetable. So actually getting both a replacement for Kenton and the extra posts we're suggesting in post now is an absolute priority. I think that's all I want to say. Although, with your indulgence, Chairman, I'll probably have a couple of words to sum up after Kenton's taken us through the presentation, highlighting the key issues in the report. So if that's okay, I'll hand over to Kenton. Thank you.
Yes, okay, and thank you for that, Councillor Simons. What I was going to do after the report, after Kenton's done his presentation, what I proposed to do was just invite members of the Task and Finish group. Councillor Hay and Councillor Swinglehurst obviously are not here, but Councillor Bartlett is. So I just thought it would be an opportunity for Councillor Bartlett, if she wishes to comment on her experience of that Task and Finish. Obviously, Councillor Hewitt was as well, but she's part of the Scrutiny Committee, so we'll have her opportunity to speak.
Great.
And then Nicola, also as a member of the Task and Finish group, if you wish to have your say as well, we'd be happy to hear from you. And then we can go over to the committee members to have their discussion. So over to you, Kenton. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your kind words, Councillor Lester and Councillor Simons. And I'll say something similar. Really, it's been a fantastic experience working with the Task and Finish group. We've got some really fantastically keen members involved in it, all with very different views, opinions, and what they can offer through the process we've been through. So it's been really good. Yeah, it's my last week as well, so I'll try not to get too emotional because I've been here a long time, and I hope that you guys can take forward everything we've been doing and put in a new successful service in a few years' time. It'll be really wonderful to see, and I will still remain a Herefordshire resident, so I'll be keeping an eye on you. I will share my screen, Tim, if that's okay, and then that way I can get control over it. But if it doesn't work, please tell me and we can revert to option 2, which is you. So, can we all see this correctly? Does it all come up on the screen? So you should have Nigel there in a bin lorry. So Councillor Simons, Nigel is one of the people that you were thanking earlier. He's a wonderful bin lorry driver. They all are brilliant, to be honest with you. Some of them can be quite annoying, but mostly, they do a fantastic job for us, and it is worth remembering they exist a lot of the time and the hard work they do. I think it's one of the hardest jobs in the county, to be honest with you, and they do a sterling job. Councillor Simons has already introduced you to the main thrust of the report. I would like to say it is huge. It's a really big issue, and if you've read through the report, there's an awful lot in there, but it's only just scratching the surface, really. This is the start of the process, so there's not an awful lot of detail in the how we provide services and how we go about it, and all the different interactions and interrelationships and everything that goes on with waste. I mean, I've been in waste now 20 years, and I find it absolutely fascinating now still. It's a fantastic service, but there's an awful lot to it, and I think that perhaps cynically, it's a view from officers that normal people, everyday people, don't always see, everything that goes on behind the scenes. We only see Nigel in his bin lorry coming along collecting the waste, and then the bin fairies do the rest. There's an awful lot that goes on behind the scenes, and I know there's a lot of people on this meeting that know that and see that. And interestingly, the next item on the agenda, the waste, the minerals and waste plan, again, it's all interlinked with that. So, it's fantastic you'll see in these two reports come up at the same time. I won't repeat what Councillor Simons has said. He's already gone through. Our contracts are ending. We've got this huge change of national waste strategy. It's the biggest in my career. We've had an awful lot of change in the waste industry, but it's just massive. It's changing everything, not just how we deal with waste as a council, but how waste is produced, all the way from production, packaging design, everything. The whole lot is changing, and there's a lot of other things going on, as well as just, our waste service, deposit return schemes, extended producer responsibility. There's a lot to get your head around in this report. And it's all happening at the same time alongside our contracts ending. So it is a wonderful opportunity. It's also a really big challenge. And, I can't hammer home enough how big this is for the council. And the one thing that probably hasn't been talked a lot about is our ambition as a council. We are really ambitious to tackle things like climate change, environmental impacts of everything we do. Again, huge service, huge environmental impacts. So, here's a really good one for the council to get its teeth into and show what its ambition really is and demonstrate, to our residents. Everyone gets this service. So we've got 200,000 residents almost. They all receive this service. It impacts on everyone in the county. So, it's a really good one. Early in the process, we sort of came up with a vision, and our vision is that waste not, want not. We value resources and their use. We'll reduce resource consumption and embrace the circular economy to maximize the life of products and materials. We treat the materials we collect as resources, not waste. And I'll add to that, and I don't know if anybody's sort of been following the news, but Sir David Attenborough, who we must listen to, You know, it was recently been talking, and he said, you know, the best thing that people can do is not waste anything. Yes, it's not just rubbish and materials, but, you know, he's talking about energy and other things as well, but we must not waste anything. You know, the circular economy is something that, you know, is filtering into the way we work. It's going to be big. It's going to impact on everything we do. Keeping resources, protecting them, making sure we don't waste them, keeping things in use as long as possible. This is the theme of how we're going to be operating in the future, so that we can actually continue to exist as a planet. So it's big. Future requirements, as I say, this presentation is just a soup sum really of everything that's in the report. So I am, you know, going to go through it quite quickly, but I hope it just gives you a flavour for what's in there. If you've not read the report, then read it, because, you know, there's a lot more in there that you need to digest as part of this process. The resource and waste strategy launched at the end of 2018. This is driving the change in our sector, in my world anyway, the world of Nicola and everybody else that's involved in waste. Some big things in there, some changes. So extended producer responsibility. That means effectively that people that produce packaging will be asked to pay for it at the end of its life. So that could mean, you know, money coming to the local authority, because at the end of the day, we deal with a lot of waste packaging. So how we treat that might be impacted by revenue streams from packaging companies. Bans for plastic materials. The big one for us, consistent recycling collection, consistency. So that means from one place to another in the country, you know, everyone's providing a similar, if not identical, but a similar service that's collecting the same sort of things. That's where we're looking to go for now. And that's where the big changes for us as a waste management service are coming in. They include things like compulsory weekly food waste collections, separate garden waste collection. The first is going to be mandatory. We're going to have to provide it to every household on a weekly basis. The garden waste collection, we don't know whether that's going to be a free for use service, or whether we'll be able to charge for it as local authorities currently do. And Councillor Simons did mention earlier on as well, at the minute, you know, we collect garden waste in green sacks. They get co-collected with the black bins. They go either to the energy from waste plant or landfill. So that's something that is going to change as part of this, with some uncertainty over whether we can charge or not. Lots of other things in the resource and waste strategy. Again, it's worth looking at that online if you're not familiar with it, and just having a good view of the things in there. The other thing I've not mentioned is deposit return schemes. They're coming in as well. So there should be reverse vending machines on the high street and elsewhere where people will be able to take back drinks bottles up to the size of the 3-litre container, whether it be plastic or can. So that we will see as well. Just to give you an idea of the timings of what's going on. So this is the resource and waste strategy timeline. The government haven't amended it yet, even with the COVID pandemic still raging. You can see the black line with the blue arrow. That's where the big changes really come in for us. So that's the mandatory food waste collections, garden waste collections, and it just happens to coincide with the end of our contracts. So you could say it's fortunate. You could say it's a more of a challenge, because, you know, everything's going to have to change at the same time as legislation changes to require these things to happen. I'll come back to timeline at the end as well, just to remind you, so don't pay too much heed to this one. Now, what I want to talk about now, more than anything else really, because it's the thing that affects us all, is the service options. This is what we all receive as householders, as residents, and it's the thing really, I think, probably that will be most interest to everyone involved. And really, the service we provide at the end of the day gives us all those other things. So we talk about resource management, recovering as much value from the service as possible, materials. You know, how we do the service is really critical. And I've given you a lot of pictures there just to give you an idea of all the different things we need to think about. Again, it's just a snippet. So as part of the work we've done, we've assessed 3 different options. They're broadly in line with the options that are in the resource and waste strategy, which the government have considered. There's a little bit of a twist to them, and I'll explain those as we go along. Option 1, which I guess is the simplest in terms of what this is our current service with the things we think we're going to have to do bolted on. So you're familiar with our alternate weekly collection service at the minute, where we collect recycling 1 week and general waste the next. So that remains, but we bolt on the weekly food waste collection that we're going to have to provide and a garden waste service as well. So it's an as is, with the extra things added on. Just to give you an idea of the sort of resource in terms of vehicles and staff, we've put on there the number of vehicles that we're likely to need to provide these services. So at the minute, we're running with about 20 rounds, but we think we could probably manage it at the very least with 19 rounds. And part of that is we're providing a food waste collection service, so we can actually reduce the number of rounds we've currently got on the service. 21 vehicles on food waste collection. So that's what it would take if we were to provide a separate food waste service. They're generally smaller vehicles because they're collecting low payloads. And that's why you need so many, particularly in a county like Herefordshire, which is one of the most rural in England particularly. And then a garden waste service on top, which you can provide with large vehicles, so a bit more efficient. Option 2 is a twin stream option. So twin stream in terms of recycling, 2 different containers for 2 different sets of materials. The idea behind sort of splitting up your recycling, and it's a key theme of the resource and waste strategy, is by splitting things up and collecting them separately, you're increasing the quality of the materials you're collecting. What we've done with this one is put it into an alternate 3 weekly collection service. So this one means reducing the frequency of general waste collection from its current 2 weeks to 3 weeks. That effectively frees up those vehicles for another week's collection of recycling. So it means that we can provide 2 recycling containers rather than 1, but not necessarily have to increase the number of vehicles we're using. So this is us trying to be cost effective here and maximizing the use of our resources. It's also really good to point out at this stage that, by restricting the residual capacity, that's your black bin at the minute, your general waste collection, we do encourage people to use the services that are out there. If you can just put everything in 1 bin and there was no capacity issue, so there's lots of space left in there, it's very tempting all to put it all in that bin because it's easier, isn't it? So it's really important. We've certainly found, and authorities have all found, that if you restrict residual capacity, you encourage people to use the recycling services. And in this case, particularly the food waste collection service that's going to come in. And option 3 is a curbside sort option. This is where recycling is collected separately as much as possible to maximize the quality of the recycling. As you can see, there's a big difference in the number of vehicles that you might need with this service, because by collecting recyclables separately from the household, and that might mean you having 3 boxes at each household, and those boxes get put onto the side of a lorry and they get sorted further into different compartments in the vehicle. You need a lot more lorries because those lorries have less capacity than our existing fleet. So less capacity means more lorries. In terms of the weekly food and the garden waste service on all these 3 options, we've kept them the same. And I think that's important to do because it kind of means you're looking at the changes separately from the things that we have to add on. This is really about the recycling options and how we provide the recycling options in future. And there are different implications of each of these different options, which I will talk about now. In terms of the stats, and I'm sorry, but as waste people, we love stats. So we tend to gather up lots of them and try to use them to justify why we do one thing over another. In these different options, what we have here is both the resource implications, so how many vehicles and staff, and also the performance implications of the 3 different options. With option 1, as we've got at the minute, we're not changing the residual capacity. So people can still, use their bin that they've got at the minute and still fill it with the same amount of things. There's not so much of a justification for using the other services because you've got enough space in your black bin to put whatever you need to put in there. So a good thing to sort of point out is that with option 2, particularly where you're restricting the residual capacity, it's having an impact on the performance. Less residual capacity, less residual waste, but more food waste recycling and more dry recycling as well is being put in. So you end up with slight variations in the performance of each of these different options, even though they are effectively collecting the same waste from each property. Option 2 being slightly better performing in terms of its recycling performance, because people, as I say, are encouraged to use the recycling services because they ain't got enough space in their black bin. Option 3, it's worth sort of pointing out that the sort of good points of that is that, because you're separating out your materials, it's focusing on quality more than it is the quantity. And while we're on this slide, I'll just point out the resource implications here, which the previous slides gave you a feeling for, but now you can sort of compare them against each other. Both option 1 and 2 use effectively the same vehicle resources, the same number of vehicles, whereas option 3, because of the reduced capacity on the recycling rounds, it does need more vehicles to provide that service, and more vehicles means more staff effectively. Something just twanged on the system. Does that mean somebody was asking a question there?
No, I think it's somebody's either gone or is coming back.
Am I going at the right sort of pace? I mean, as I said, there's an awful lot of information here, and I am concerned that I'm overloading everybody, but is everyone following me so far?
Absolutely, yep.
Okay, good. So a very busy slide, and I apologize for this again. It's better that you read this in the report, because then you get the context as well. But what I kind of wanted to show with this report is the level of detail that we focused on, and this is but a summary of the financial assessments that have gone on with each of these 3 different options. It gives you at the end what we expect our collection service. So this does exclude the household recycling centre service, which is probably about 1/3 of our service in terms of the tonnage that it handles. So this is only focusing on the collection service, so what we collect with the bin lorries and how we deal with the materials that are collected through that service. So it's not the whole thing. The key sort of things to sort of focus on are that, option 2, similarly to sort of performance, seems to better perform in terms of the finances. And that's simply because, yes, you're using the same sort of amount of the vehicles, but in terms of the treatment, you are recycling more. Your value of materials is greater. So that's where you're getting the cost saving over option 1. With option 3, it's fairly sensible to assume, yes, you get more value from the recycling that you're collecting because you've got a higher quality of material, but you are employing many more vehicles to provide the service. So in terms of financial performance, that one turns out the worst of the 3 different ones. In the report, and I've not put it in here, I would have loved to have sort of like done some comparisons with other authorities, because as a waste management officer, that's how we look at ourselves compared to others, and that's how we sort of base ourselves. Benchmarking is really important in our service. What I've provided at the bottom of this table is just an indication of what our price per household might be based on current rates, if we were to provide the services these, including the household recycling centre cost. This is our whole service cost. So between £167 and £181 per household. We currently have a cost of about 175 for comparison. So they're not too different from what we currently pay within a PFI contract. Obviously, if we weren't in a PFI contract, those costs may be a lot lower. I sort of stress this point here, because when you compare this with other authorities that are already providing these services, with twists, they fall into a sort of similar range bracket. So, from my perspective, these are quite, I'll say reliable is the wrong word, but you can justify them because they turn out pretty much at the same sort of price as other authorities are already achieving, doing the same things. This slide just tries to sort of provide a bit of a comparison of the different services. As I've talked through it, you've got option 1, it's the least change option. So, in terms of that, that's the benefit. It's the least change for our residents to get used to. It's the least change for us to get used to. It's the least change for our crews to get used to as well. So in terms of delivering that, that's probably the simplest option to do. However, in terms of what the resource and waste strategy is trying to achieve, which is high quality recycling that can be used over and over again, keeping those resources in play, it's probably the least favourable. The most favourable in terms of quality, option 3, you're collecting everything separately, so those materials will have a high value, but in terms of cost, it's the highest. So all of these options have lots of different pros and cons that you have to consider sort of when you're moving things forward. But in terms of delivering on the strategy, being resource effective, efficient, options 3 is really good, and option 2 is really good because you're maximizing the amount of materials you're there and improving quality. So those 2 stand out in terms of comparison with the strategy. Just wanted to refocus on the timeline as well, because the previous timeline in terms of resource and waste strategy, it showed that we've got changes coming into play at the end of, during 2023. So that's at the same time that our contracts are expiring. So say could be good timing that. For us, with the contracts expiring, it means that we've got almost exactly 3 years left until we have no service. I think it's important to point out that there's a lot of work to do in terms of designing the service we're going to provide and then procuring it. What I've provided here is a bit of a rundown of what we need to do and when, and it leads to effectively a commissioning process. So we've got a year effectively between now and next year, by which time we've decided exactly what we want to do. So we've got a year to decide, what our service is going to look like and produce, the specifications, the procurement documents to go out to tender. And then we've got a year of commissioning. So that's what we've got left. I don't think that this timeline can be compressed anymore. So now is the action time. If you don't act now, it means that these periods at the end become compressed and you've got less time to do the work you need to do to actually put the service in place. And it's important. I know Councillor Durkin's asked a question, but I'll just finish and then we'll come back to Councillor Durkin. I don't know what he's asked. But this point at the end, the mobilisation period, once we've decided what we're doing and procured a service, we've got a contractor in place, they need to implement it. They need to go and do things like buy bin lorries. That takes time. There might be works that need to happen to our household recycling centres, our transfer stations, all the assets that we're going to feed with all the materials that we're going to be collecting. So we're going to do something different, and we are going to have to do something different because we've got food waste collection coming online no matter what. We're going to have to make changes. So that time is when you're actually starting to, buy bin lorries, make changes to your services. That takes time. So you can't really delay anymore with this process. It's got to happen. We've just got to get on and do it. And I'll leave that point there. Sorry, there's 2 raised hands. Councillor Durkin, I think you were first one up. What have you got a query?
Well, hang on. Sorry, Kenton. With the presentation in the way, I can't see all the participants very easily. So okay. How far are we away from finishing the
We're really close to the end. So is it okay if I finish and then we can deal with the...
If we can just finish the presentation and then we got those raised hands. But I did say that I would go to Councillor Bartlett and Nicola Percival first. But carry on, Kenton, please.
Okay. So just to sort of highlight a few of the key recommendations in the report. I think there are 19 in the report, so I can't go through them as a presentation. We'd be here all day. I think it's probably going to generate quite a few questions anyway. Councillor Simon has already mentioned sort of a key theme of the whole report we've got here, and to be honest, a key priority of what we're going to have to be doing in future, and that's to treat waste as a resource. I'd go back to my first point, the range of interests and opinions and views of the members of the Task and Finish group. It meant that we could see this whole service from different perspectives. Prioritizing public acceptance has got to be, again, something we have to make sure we provide as part of this service. If our residents don't want to use this service, or they find it hard to use this service, or it's difficult to understand, or they don't get enough information from us to tell them how to use the service, we don't get that level of public acceptance. So it's one of our priorities as well. Maximising reuse, again, is another priority for us. As Councillor Simons highlighted at the start, we see the household recycling centre service as almost an untapped resource at the minute. It's been running as it is for best part of 20 years already, with very little changes to it. A lot of materials are being lost. Reuse particularly, is a lot of useful items that are just going to waste at the minute, and I'll refer back to David Attenborough. He said don't do that, so we shouldn't do that anymore. And that's something we could do now. We don't have to wait for 3 years. So again, that's something where we can take action now to do something that not only benefits in terms of reusing materials and diverting it away from waste, but also making use of those materials. So things like furniture for social needs and things like that. Just going back to the timeline, we need to act. Seriously, it just has to be done now. The longer we delay doing things, the more risky the outcomes become. And going back to the RAG rating table, the Task and Finish group believe that we should now progress to consulting with the public on options 2 and 3. We need to make changes. We need to become a more resource efficient service. And those are the two that, we think as Task and Finish group are the ones that can deliver us the most advantageous outcomes as part of this service. So we need to get a view of the public over what they think to us changes and the reasons why, and feed that into our decision-making process. Just to sort of highlight key risks, and again, I feel like I'm repeating myself a little bit here. Further delay, there's not an awful lot of time left, and we can't fail to resource this process. So get key people in post so that they can actually do the work that's required to get a good outcome. And some actions to follow that on. So I don't need to reiterate these. I think we've talked about them enough, and I think you've got a flavour for it. And that's all from me, really. As I say, there's an awful lot more in the report, and I do urge people to read it if they've not read it in detail, because we put an awful lot of effort into it. So it'll be a shame to see it go to waste.
Pardon the pun. Can you put the presentation down now? Thank you. And as I said earlier on, Councillor Bartlett, as one of the members of the Task and Finish, would you like to make any comments?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to make comments at Scrutiny today. And also, Kenton, that was a brilliant presentation, really going out on a high. Thank you so much for that. And I think you've really said quite a lot of what it was that I wanted to put into the mix today. And I will quote again the government's Resource and Waste Strategy 2018, that it is a once in a generation policy change. And that does give us a really good opportunity and the ability to recognise the Council's ambitions and recognise the climate change and the ecological emergency. It gives us the opportunity to look at what we want from a contract going forward. So yes, an opportunistic timing, I suppose, as much as a worrying timing with everything else that's going on that we do have to change. This is, our contract will come to an end. The waste strategy will affect how we work, and we will going to have to need some changes. One or two of the things that really came out for me in the task and finish, it was the ability to recognise that the waste, although the contract, we pick up for everybody across the county, it's not a one-size-fits-all contract. Certainly the pressures within the market towns, when you've got quite high dense population and in the city, very, very different to a rural round. So recognising that across the county, there's quite a lot of divergence in how we interact with our bin then. And again, it was the opportunity to look at new ways of working, to look at that the circular economy, and the opportunity to look at how we could maximise the value out of our household waste centres. So one of the things that really came out for me was the ability to add the social value into the contract that's been missing at the moment, and certainly the work the council's doing on social value, that's going to bring really, really good opportunities with that. And so really, I think hopefully the committee will see that in the report, we've given an overall balanced consideration to the three options that we were looking at, and hopefully come up with a good set of recommendations under the expert guidance of our chair, Councillor Simons, and the help and steerage of Nicola and Kenton. So yes, thank you. I would recommend this report to the Scrutiny Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bartlett. And last but by no means least, Nicola Percival, you were on the steering group as well. Would you like to make any comments at this stage?
Just a thank you, really, I think, to the members that have been involved for their enthusiasm and their forethought into what we should be doing moving forwards, and their ambition in the recommendations that they're looking at, so that we can make some big changes. And specifically sort of start to move higher up that waste hierarchy, so that we are preventing waste and that we're keeping resources in use for longer wherever possible, wherever we can. It is a big challenge that we've got ahead of us, but if we can move swiftly on this, I'm confident that we can deliver this, and we can deliver better services to our residents and for the environment across the county. So yeah, just a thank you really for everyone's participation in making this a really good process, and specifically to Kenton, who's put a huge amount of work into all of this. And yeah, he'll be really, really sorely missed.
Thank you very much for those comments. Right, okay, we shall move on now to the committee members who are chomping at the bit to ask their questions. And first up is Councillor Durkin.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, okay, my congratulations to Councillor Simons and the whole team. It was a very interesting report to read and to understand. It's not because of a lot of pictures. I did read the words as well. A question I've got, and it was partially covered within Kenton's slide on key recommendations to prioritise public acceptance. Now, I was around about 2014 when we went to the 2-bin system, and that created a whole lot of concern with the public about the way forward and how they're going to cope with it. This seems to me to be a quantum leap with regard to, if we go back to the RAG sheet, with regards to all the reds that were there. And I wondered, did the committee or the Task and Finish group, my apologies, Task and Finish group, did they give consideration to how public might be consulted and what to inform the public with? Because, as I say, it's going to be vital, especially if we're going to have a quick uptake on this. And secondly, I think that if the communications team do the information to the public, I think this thing is so complex that it might be appropriate that the waste team, if I may refer to them as that, become the primary information provider for the comms team, as opposed to the other way around. And that when they go out to the public, that they are able to give informed questions and informed information. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Simons, you wanted to help answer that question?
Yes, if I may, Chair. It's an absolutely critical point that Councillor Durkin makes. And in fairness, we didn't discuss the detail of the how, because that's really for further down the road. But the issue around communication and engagement is absolutely critical, which is why the report is endorsing taking on a communications officer at this point and not waiting till a few months before we go live. From my own experience, I've dealt with as an officer of contract changes and service changes of similar scale, and social media, running road shows in areas as you roll out the different service and so on, is that there are lots of tried and tested methods for it. But I think the key thing for me, unlike many forms or many services that we communicate on, this is about behaviour change. So whatever we end up with at the end of this process, once we get to the procurement and the new contracts, will be a different service. And whilst we will take a proportion of the community with us by engaging early, talking to them about the options, helping people understand why we're making the changes, ultimately we're going to make life more complicated for people, which is not normally something that local authorities set out to do, but that is the nature of what we are embarking on. So having the right people in place now and the right type of engagement, so people have that understanding or are travelling on this journey with us, rather than 2 months before it goes live having a bin arrive and think, what the hell is all this about? That is absolutely critical to making this process work. And I'm sure there'll be lessons locally that we learned from, as you say, when we moved across to the wheel bin service, and from lots of other local authorities who've made similar scale changes. But that's the point I will continue to hammer home, is that we need to be starting that process tomorrow. Thank you. I'm sure Kenton will have much more wise words.
I think you've summed it up perfectly. I don't think I need to add anything else to that.
Okay then, we'll go straight to Councillor Hewitt.
Hello, Kenton. I really like your presentation to General Scrutiny. I loved being in the group. I thought it was really both divergent and convergent. We all had the same drive to reduce, reuse and recycle. So I think David Attenborough would be proud of us. And I really love your terminology, act now, because there are things that we can do now. So one of the first things I'd say is I'd absolutely endorse what Councillor Simons was just saying, in that comms is very important. But one of the things you said to us as we were trying to leave the group was, sorry, but you've got to carry on. So that's one of the things, I don't know whether it's actually written in the report, that the recommendation was for the task and finish group to continue their work and to work with a communications team to start that off. So the kickstart would be great, a household recycling centre, because there are lots and lots of people who are going to be in economic need and need access quick and fast to goods that could be repaired and reused. So let's go forward with that. But I do have one question, and you're going to hate me, Kenton, because it's my old thing about how much does go to landfill and where does it go to landfill? And what I'm concerned about is the business model that we're going to have to navigate, moving from a contractor saying, oh yes, you've got enough, and so therefore you can pay me this amount to put it in. But when we reduce to, say, 5% landfill, we're going to be in a position where we've got 5% of stuff we don't know what to do with, and the contractor's saying, well, you're not paying me enough, so I'm going to prioritise someone else. So I'd like to just have a little bit more of an explanation of how we move to zero landfill as quickly as possible. And also, I'd just really like to know exactly where landfill is. I think it's Worcestershire somewhere, but I also saw Doncaster mentioned in the Hendiker document. So if you could give me a bit of clarity on that, somebody somewhere, please, that would be great.
So I'm probably best on that one, aren't I? So at the minute, well, last year, we landfilled 20% of the waste that's produced from Herefordshire's waste management service. And that's even after we've spent a lot of money, time, effort developing an energy from waste plant over in Hartlebury. So that 20% currently gets sent to Hillamore landfill, which is near Pershore. So it's part of our joint integrated waste management contract with Worcestershire. And that still forms an important part of that service. Moving forward with what we've been thinking about is really what comes next. What we know for sure is that we are joint, or will be joint owners in an energy from waste plant with our colleagues over in Worcestershire. When this current service expires, we need to make the most of that facility, and we should make the most of that facility. And even with, the planned changes in the resource and waste strategy, we're still likely to have, a significant element of our waste that still needs to be treated somehow, and that EFW is the best way of doing it, in my mind. But there's very little that needs to go to landfill. So that is something we should and can easily, in my mind, change as part of what our new service will be. Is that enough? Have I covered your queries?
Well, sorry, Councillor Hewitt, did you just want to come back?
Yeah, so Kenton, are you saying that we're tied at the moment? We're tied into a landfill contract where with 20%, but that also is going to terminate. I don't really understand, why we can't do it immediately, for instance, and send it all to energy from. Have you got an answer for that?
It's part of the current terms and conditions of that waste service. So our contractor is required to meet certain targets in that service and to recover a certain amount of waste, and they recover it through either recycling or sending it to the energy from waste plant. They are not required to recover it all. So they are able to send waste to the landfill, which they still operate as well, and use some of the space that is remaining at the energy from waste plant to fill it with commercial waste, which they make a little bit more money from than they do putting our waste through it. And that's put as in simpler terms as I can possibly manage. And I'm sure my colleagues in Worcestershire would have a far more technically accurate explanation, but that's how I see it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bowes.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. A lot of work went into it. I can't honestly say I've never been interested in waste up until this point, but it brings out so many things I've never even considered in my life. One of them is to do with the green bags. So what happens to the green bags now? So I know they're collected in the same lorry, but what happens to them after that? That's one of my questions. I've got several, so would it be easier if I just did them one at a time or all in one go?
One at a time.
Okay, let's go with that one first.
One at a time.
Again, probably I'll answer that unless Nicola wants to chirp in, but currently our garden waste sacks are co-collected with our residual waste, so the black bins. It is part of our statutory requirements to provide a separate garden waste collection service, but we can charge for it, and we don't have to compost that waste. So the cheapest and most effective way of doing it is collecting it in garden sacks alongside our residual waste, and they currently go to either the energy from waste plant or to landfill. We have no requirement to compost it, and it would cost us more to provide a separate composting service. And that was considered, I think, about 3-4 years ago, but we decided not to do it because it would increase our costs.
Okay. So what could we do between now and 3 years' time then to change the way we deal with that green waste? We don't really want it going to landfill, do we?
I mean, there's no reason that's what we were investigating a few years ago, and I know Nicola did a lot of work on that in terms of putting a business case together to have a separate collection service. And just for our interest as well, I mean, there is a privately operated one operating at the minute. So we're not the only players in the game. But you know, if we wanted to restart that work and do a new business case to get a separate garden waste collection service going now, there's no reason why we couldn't do that. The only thing I'll say is that will still take time, and we are now approaching the end of the service. So whether it's better to integrate it as part of the new service, or whether to put something in place now, which will then have to be put into place with a new service that then comes shortly after it, I don't know. But there's no reason why we can't look into that to do it sooner rather than later.
Okay. With regard to the risk, the compliance risk, so on your chart, you've got the 3 options. I assume option 1 has so many reds that it would be so non-compliant that there is no point going ahead with that, and that's why the group are recommending options 2 and 3. Yep. Okay. Is there anything that the group didn't look into that they'd like to have looked into on the task and finish group? I agree. I think the task and finish group needs to continue. There are lots of things that maybe you didn't have chance to look at due to the time frame, but do you think there's other things that you need to look at and get involved in, like the comms and things like that?
Perhaps if I can initially respond to that, Chair.
Sure.
One of the challenges of chairing the group was actually keeping this to a manageable set of proposals, because in terms of collection options, there are probably as many alternatives as there are certainly councillors and possibly residents of the county. So the short answer is yes, there are all manner of things we could consider, but the reality is, and my priority was making sure that we focused on, if you like, the key elements to be able to move us forward. But one of the themes that the report does talk about is that the current arrangements are quite inflexible, and as Kenton has highlighted around green waste and other things, our opportunity to be able to change that without significant cost is very limited. So one of the key themes for the new contract or contracts will be about building in some flexibility so that we're not held hostage by a contractor if we do want to introduce a new material. So for me, it's about, if you like, getting the core service agreed and getting the procurement process running for that, but building in flexibility so that if we want to, test a door-to-door battery recycling or whatever at some point in the future, that we can do that. But I would caution against trying to make significant change at this point, partly because although there are 3 more years of collection activity, even if we get some additional resources and extra officers in post to help us through this, their hands are going to be very, very full, continuing to manage what we do, developing the concepts we currently have into something that actually is a contract, and keeping the public engaged right the way through the process. So although it is very tempting, and I do understand the frustration that there are some things that, why are we still doing this? Well, the reality is it's effectively project management, a business decision that we've got to live with it. There are, however, other opportunities. For example, were we to get some additional officer resource in the meantime, the household recycling centres, potentially the likelihood is, and again, I don't want to preempt the outcome of this process, but it's quite likely that they won't sit in the main contract, that they will either be delivered in-house or by like a subsidiary contract, if you like. And actually that's something that we could potentially start developing now if we've got more people than just Kenton's replacement and obviously Nicola to be able to deal with service delivery and development in the meantime. So it is a bit frustrating, but that's the reality, is that because of the scale of the project, we've really got to try and stay focused at the moment. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Chairman, if it's okay, I've just got 2 more quick questions and 1 observation.
Sure.
Okay. The reuse at the recycling centre, I think that's a fantastic idea. And is there things that we could start doing now, working with local community groups and things to start kicking that off? Because I think that's a fantastic idea. I know the programme that you're talking about, and you know, it's opened my eyes and a lot of other people. So I think maybe we could start looking at that somehow now to get charities and individuals involved. And then
I think it's a sort of qualified yes to that one. Going back to my previous response, that there is the opportunity to start developing that, but we need somebody post in addition to Kenton's replacement to help develop that. But the opportunity, I think, is there. And I was going to make another point, but I forgot what it was. Apologies.
You can come back to that. And then there's one more question from Councillor Bowes.
One more question. So well, I would have assumed at one point that sending things to an incinerator was a good way of treating some of the waste, because we were still making getting energy out of it that at it more closely. We negate that by sending the waste all the way to Worcester in the first instance. So anything we make out of the reusing of the energy at the incinerator is actually negated by the fact that we're taking it miles and miles. Is that?
Kenton, is that a question you can answer?
Dealing with waste more locally, you know, is better. There's no 2 ways about it. Not having waste at all is best. But you know, where you have it and dealing with it locally and doing something useful with it is pushing waste up the hierarchy. And I'm trying to not use technical terms, but Nicola has introduced the waste hierarchy, so I will, you know, reiterate her words. You know, we need to push waste up the hierarchy, and that means preventing it first, reusing it, recycling it, recovering it, and then only getting rid of what's left. So wherever we can do something, and you know, the reuse idea, it's brilliant. It's a really brilliant thing, and just about everybody. It's another thing where, you know, most local authorities are doing this, whether it be a reuse shop on a recycling centre, which is allowing people to buy stuff, or one nearby if it's not on the site itself. You know, it's paying for itself. It's taking off resources and, you know, giving it to people that are going to do something useful with it. So it stops us sending waste to either the EFW or the landfill site, where, yes, you get some power out of the EFW, but after that, it's gone, it's lost. So we need to do something better with our waste.
Okay, just before we move on to Councillor Stark's question, can I just go back to a question that Councillor Bowes said? If the green sacks end up in the incinerator or landfill, can we just have an explanation as to why we're charging for an extra bag? Because presumably if people put their green waste into a black bag and then a black bin, it would go to the incinerator just the same, but there would be no extra cost for a bag.
So we don't allow garden waste to be put in our black bins. So if people did put it in their black bins, they would end up with their bin not being collected. Garden waste is a waste stream that we can charge for, but we can only charge for the collection element, and we do, and that's how we recover that collection charge for it. And to be frank, you know, I'll say this: we don't want people to use that service. You know, we don't like it ourselves, because, you know, it's not doing anything. It's better that people compost it at home, take it to the house or recycling centre, use a private collection firm, which there is one, and it's operating pretty much county-wide. So there are better things to do with it than that.
Excellent. Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Stark.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, this is a very timely report for a number of reasons, not least because of climate emergency. Can I just start with the first question in terms of point of clarification, Kenton? I noticed from your presentation that option 2 would fall foul of legal compliance on frequency grounds. Does that make it a non-starter?
We don't know, is the truth. I mean, at the minute, we're required to collect recycling separately, but we don't. There's a get-out clause through a process known as TEEP. We don't know the details, and that's probably the bigger risk that's worth pointing out. You know, the government haven't finalised the detail of what we're going to be doing in 3 years' time. We expect further consultations. I think Kirsten's on the call, she probably knows better than me. You know, we expect further consultation early next year, so 2021 start of, which will put more detail into what the government are proposing. All we really know at this stage is that we're going to be doing weekly food waste collections from 2023 onwards. We're going to have to collect garden waste separately, and the government have a preferred option in option 3, which they like, which is based on the Somerset collection model, which is curbside sort. But we don't know whether the others are going to be allowed, or whether you just have to justify why you're doing them, or what. There's a lot more detail to come. And in terms of flexibility of the service, we also need to be flexible in terms of our approach, because it may well be we could be surprised with something in a year's time that we're not planning for. So at this stage, it's keep all options open, because we don't know whether they're going to be allowed, not allowed, or whether they're going to be allowed with certain conditions, what the financial repercussions of each option might be, because there's going to be different levels of funding potentially coming to local authorities for providing things in different ways. Again, this report scratches the surface. There's so much more that's come in.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Stark, did you have another question?
Yes, we have touched upon comms, but I think there's a real challenge here for us in terms of what message we're going to try and get across to households. We know some of these changes are compulsory. We know some of the changes are discretionary. It's up to us how we might want to move forward. We know some of the changes are subject to further change, as you've just said, Kenton. I'm just wondering, in that context, what sort of communications we're going to put out there to households.
I mean, it's interesting because I know that the team and other people, Joni's on the call as well. We've started, I guess, the process of designing consultations now, and I suspect we'll be getting some advice on how best to provide that consultation as well. So once we've gone through this, that's the next step here, is designing a suitable consultation, so we can ask the right questions to get views, feedback that is valuable in taking this process forward from the public and other service users. Okay.
Thank you. Right, we've got Councillor Hewitt and then Councillor Bowes, and then I'd quite like to ask a question if that's okay. Councillor Hewitt.
Right. So this is probably going to sound like a real dumbo numbers question. I'm on page 435 of the report, and I really just don't understand it. So it says something about, if we have option 1, the average capture of garden waste will be 820%. Could somebody explain to me how we get 820%? Because that's, I just don't understand it.
What report are you referring to there? The options assessment report.
Councillor Hewitt, you're on mute. Could you just clarify?
Page 435.
435.
435.
I think it's the CAT outputs.
Oh, right. I probably wouldn't have the technical knowledge to explain it, to be honest with you. That's why we employed a consultant to do that CAT analysis for us. So it's something I'd probably have to go away and look at and get back to you, Councillor Hewitt.
Okay. Councillor Bowes.
Thank you. The option 3, which was numerous boxes, my only concern with that would be we have a large population of elderly residents, and I think for elderly residents carrying those boxes might actually be quite difficult. But on a positive note to end on, my mom is the most averse to change person you have ever met, lives in a different county and has numerous bins, blue, green, brown and little boxes. And although she said to start with it was quite confusing, she now sees it as second nature and wouldn't have it any other way. So I think that is a positive. She's an elder person who does not do change. And although she didn't like it to start with, absolutely loves it now. So it does work.
Okay. Thank you for that, Councillor Bowes. So yes, it's the complexity of option 3 that is a concern. One of the things I would just say, my question really is, whilst we've got all of the recommendations, all 19 of them, with regard to recommendation 13, where it says just consult on options 2 and 3, if I can just quote Kenton, you said a moment ago, got to keep all options open. I've thought about it a lot. I'm still not convinced that it's right to only consult on options 2 and 3. I think it should be all options 1, 2, and 3. Ultimately, the council will make its decision anyway, but I do not see any harm in consulting on all 3 options, especially when, as Kenton has reminded us, the government haven't finalised exactly what it is that they'll be requiring of us. And in order to get that all options open approach, I just think it would be right to allow the general public all of the options, so that we can get as much feedback as we can. And if we have all of those options on the table, it could be that, you know, people's fears are allayed because people are willing to sort out lots of boxes. But that would be my question to Kenton and the chair who put forward the recommendations, Councillor Simons.
Perhaps if I start on that one and Kenton can join in. It is an interesting point, and I think, you know, this comes back to having a clear, consistent kind of comms involvement right immediately from now on and right through the process. And I guess for me, it would be not as much consultation, but as an explanation as to why we believe that's not appropriate, for example. So not to conceal it as an option so that it is in the public domain, but rather than saying which one would you like to stay with this rather than option 2 or 3, because we believe for both, if you like, technical and legislative reasons, we can't stay with option 1. I think that's the way, that would be my suggestion, would be that it is part of the consultation process, but more as an explanation why we don't believe it's viable. Clearly, that doesn't prevent people from coming back to express a view to say they don't think our reasoning is sound and we should still be considering it. But you're right, it's about striking a balance between perhaps not misleading people into a belief that that could be an option. If we believe kind of technically and operationally and legislatively that it isn't, that we should be very clear about that and why, so that people understand, but also have the opportunity to come back at us on it, if that makes sense. But Kenton, I'm sure you can add to that.
It's a really difficult one, I think, because that uncertainty still exists as what future legislation will be. But you know, what we do know is that the theme of the resource strategy is resource recovery. It's about achieving high quality recycling. Option 1 can't achieve that high quality recycling, and that, in my mind, is the main basis for sort of ruling it out. Gov's preferred option is 3. You know, they want separately collected high quality recycling streams. That's what they want. That's what they're telling us all to do. It may well be that they'll legislate and say, you're all going to do that one. From a practical point of view, and some of the practical considerations have come up in this discussion, you know, we do like wheelie bins in Herefordshire. And you know, Councillor Durkin points out it was very difficult to get them in initially, and it was, because change is very difficult. Even when it's very positive, people are still very skeptical over it. If we went out to consultation and said, would you like to change your service? No matter what the options were, people would say no. So it's a difficult consultation to script, but I'd agree with Councillor Simons. It's perhaps not hiding the fact that it still stays there, but it's almost encouraging people, well, look, we probably going to have to change, what changes are you more amenable to? And come at it from that point of view, rather than saying this is still an option, do you want to change? Because they will come back and just say no.
Yeah, Kenton, just to come back on that for a second, though, there's a lot of challenge, as I understand it, about there's this determination to recycle good quality products, but there's a concern that in doing so, these products are still in the system that then end up leaching out in becoming an environmental problem elsewhere. And where you have increased amounts of energy from waste, you have neutralized that problem. So it could be that there's a fair challenge to say that the government may think that option 3 is the best option, but if you're concerned about landfill and you resolve that issue from incineration, energy from waste, and then the initiative to recycle isn't necessarily as straightforward as people may imagine, and there is a limited life of certain materials that get recycled, isn't there that's why there should be the option of keeping option 1 in, because a much more effective way of neutralizing leaching is to just deal with it as energy from waste, and that would mean that option 1 is still a viable option.
I mean, probably the other way around, in terms of, option 1 is the thing that's producing materials that perhaps don't have such a clear way of being reused usefully. So say that you improve the quality of materials, it's much more likely that those materials are going to be used for a good purpose and not end up becoming a pollutant somewhere, even if that's halfway around the world. So there's a lot of, I think, justification for going down a higher quality route. You're absolutely right in EFW, and one of the recommendations in the report is to go down a zero waste to landfill route. What waste we have left, to avoid that harm that you refer to in terms of leaching out, is that, if it puts through an EFW, that is the best thing you can do with it, if you have to treat it that way. But what we do know is that the government have reaffirmed their commitment for introducing these measures recently in August. We are heading towards a 65% recycling target in 2035. So although, again, that seems a long way off, it will soon come round. And, the service and the recommendations we've made of this report are the start of how we're going to achieve that. It's not nailed on certain, but that's what's coming.
Okay, thank you for that. Right, we've got 4 people now wanting to ask questions, and Councillor Wilding, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, I thought it was a great report, and thank you everybody who was involved in doing that. And I really liked the presentation of it. Limiting it to about 19 recommendations was spectacularly good. If we can do that with our up and coming task and finish on climate change, we'll be doing really well, I think. I lived in Bristol for quite a while, and we had Kerbside Sort there, and I thought it worked really well. But my question is actually about employment. I note that option 3 obviously uses, creates 40 more jobs actually, and lots of the other areas where you might expand how you recycle and reuse will create more jobs, and we're obviously going to have to create more jobs because we're going to lose a lot of jobs in traditional areas that are going to have to be, stopped in some way or another. So I was just wondering, how much consideration did you give to whether you're going to suggest things that actually create a lot more employment? Thank you.
Shall I go again?
Yes, please do.
Councillor Simons, I was going to say, but I mean, the report, we do touch on this quite a lot in terms of, the social values, particularly in what Councillor Bartlett was discussing earlier on. There are more job opportunities. I think we refer to it in the report as a positive, that there's a lot more job opportunities here, a lot more training, and it's not just in providing the service. Again, you've got to think of this holistically as well. You know, higher quality materials, more separation at curbside could potentially mean, you know, more local means of dealing with it. The twin stream option gives you some opportunities for doing that as well. So it's about the whole picture. It's not just about in the service itself. What we do know, and you know, Nicola and I have discussed this a lot, is that, you know, we've got a concern over HGV drivers. There ain't a lot of them. So in terms of employing those sort of specialist roles that we need, we might need to do something around the sign in terms of training and development, you know, to get those people available to be used in the service.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bowes.
Sorry, last one, I think. I just wanted to ask Claire a question about what is the process and the governance and the timeline along that we'd need to work to, just so that I can get a better understanding in my head. I know that, you know, we would look at it and scrutinise it, but where does it go from here, and how would it work?
Sorry, your question is to Claire.
Claire.
Claire who, sorry?
Sorry, Claire. Oh, the lady who, Nicola.
Nicola, yes. Nicola, your microphone. Okay.
Sorry.
It's okay. I forget.
The process we have in place at the moment is that from here, we move forward to Councillor Davies making or accepting recommendations in October. We will go out to carry out a consultation process, which will go from hopefully November time and run round to the beginning of the year. And then I believe there's a key member decision to be made in February of next year, which will outline then how we move forwards from there on in.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Hewitt, and then after that, Councillor Stark.
So, yeah, I just wanted to go back to this thing about public acceptance and putting out their option number 1, and to just say that I think if you give the public the information in a very clear way as to what are the consequences of each of the choices that they make, there's such a big mandate out there via Dear David Attenborough and, you know, and the youth that are coming up, that we want to have a circular economy and that we want to move forward and not just shove things in the bin. And I know in the middle of that stands behavioural change, but I honestly think that behavioural change is led by, for instance, you know, if children are you're trying to prevent young adolescents going and, you know, going on a drinking spree and then driving, you know, the fire service do very, very good education about what the consequences of something like that would be. And I think that there will be a lot more public drive as to say, okay, we're willing to do our bit. I don't believe the public out there I think we're habitual, but I do think we can engage our minds with this. So I just want to give a plea for, I know the public want to do this. It's just, it is out there.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Stark.
Yes, I would like to change the debate to one towards fleet management and fleet movement around the county. It's inevitable that if we do move to some of these other options, that we're going to have to employ more larger vehicles on the roads. And we do have some very narrow roads across the county, even in our market towns. And I do notice that on collection days, it can be very disruptive for the collection service to be moving through the town while other traffic is trying to move around it as well. I just wondered whether the group had looked at the impact of any of the options that does increase the fleet size considerably, whether they could answer that.
Councillor Simons?
I mean, that was very much a theme of a number of the discussions, and is, if you like, the group, I think, see that as a key weakness of the government preferred strategy, option 3. I think that's one of the clear benefits of option 2, is that you get to reuse the vehicles for different materials on different weeks, which therefore means you need a smaller fleet, and ultimately there's both less resource consumption in terms of purchase of vehicles, but also the ongoing cost in terms of the number of miles we're travelling, because you can have larger vehicles with bigger payloads that are therefore more cost effective than the lower payload multi-material vehicles. So it was definitely part of the discussion, and I have a feeling at some point Kenton may have even done some background papers on trying to model some of that, but it is very, it's obviously quite a complex thing to come up with an empirical figure. So we've, again, because this is a high level sort of strategy document, we've focused on the principles, and that is definitely one of the disbenefits of option 3 is, whilst from Councillor Wilding's point, potentially there is more local employment, the downside is that you've got more vehicles on the road and more diesel being burnt. Again, we talked about alternative fuel vehicles, but again, the technology for a county of our size geographically is that electric vehicles, dust carts are not an option at this stage, and even hybrid ones are kind of on the margins of viability. So it was certainly part of the consideration from the group.
Okay, right. Thank you for that. Councillor Stark, did you have another question? Sorry. No. Okay. Well, I'm conscious of the time. I'm also conscious of the fact that Councillor Gemma Davis has sat there patiently listening in. As the Cabinet member responsible for contracts, would you like to make any comment?
Yes, thank you for that. I'm happy to sit in and listen. Actually, it's really grateful for all of the comments, and really super grateful that the Task and Finish group took it on, and General Scrutiny took it on, because for me it's a really good example of a hybrid committee system whereby we're looking at pre-scrutiny and really getting to grips with people across all of the different parties within our council to say what's the best thing for Herefordshire. So I'm really grateful that this was for me one of the best scrutiny reviews that I've seen, and certainly something that will really help Cabinet, which will then inform full council what we should be doing with our waste. Really grateful to all of the officer support. I know it's been a real job for you. You've had to keep the service going during COVID and keep the Task and Finish going during COVID. I know how difficult that must have been. So genuinely, thanks from me and thanks from everybody, I'm sure, for your support during that. Interestingly, one of the things I was going to say was about David Attenborough, and I think it's really important just to put it in context. He said, don't waste electricity, don't waste food, don't waste power, just treat the natural world as though it is precious, which it is. And don't squander those bits of it that we have control of. And I think that is so relevant for this Task and Finish group, because this is our once in a lifetime opportunity to do that. So everything from within the recommendations, I see no reason not to push forward for accepting. I think they're really great. I think that to continue, I would love I love Scrutiny, and particularly a Task and Finish group, to look into the reuse sites. I think that's something that can get done relatively quickly. So really grateful for that. One of the things I just wanted to touch on was around about the social value. We're in a really good position where the social value procurement and commissioning is coming through our council. So within the next 2 months, we'll have a proper strategy that says, what does social value look like at our council when we're procuring contracts? And this will be an amazing contract for us to be able to do this on. So social value isn't just talking about the employment of people, but also looking at how are we ethically contracting people. So how are we making sure as much as we can that our waste isn't ending up in places like Sri Lanka, which I saw today on the news, and they're now sending it back to the UK. So there are lots of advantages of having social value within this contract. So I'm really grateful that it's come at the time that it has. And the final thing I just wanted to say was I first met Kenton when I was a scrutiny officer at the council, and he did a waste task and finish group, but it was actually on permits at the recycling centres. And I know how hard he worked then, and my experience has been that he's never stopped working that hard. His passion for waste and reducing it is second to none. And I know that we will really, really miss you, Kenton, at the council, and you're very lucky, and your new employers are very lucky to have you. So I wanted to say thank you, because it's your last week, on behalf of me, the cabinet, and everybody. I'm sure every councillor will agree to that. So
Indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for those kind words. And Councillor Simons, you wanted to come in. Still on mute.
Oh, sorry. Yes, if we've satisfied, kind of answered everyone's questions, I just thought if it's okay with you, Chairman, I'd make a couple of final points before the committee heads over to the debate.
Well, I think we've pretty much had our debate. What we need to do is agree the recommendations.
Yeah.
Whether we do that en bloc or one by one, I'll look to officers for that. But yes, by all means, if you would like to sum up, we'd appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah. So obviously we've covered a lot of ground this morning, and one of the issues I think Councillor Bowes and others have raised was around the compliance element on option 2, and I think, to my mind, it's one of those situations where we've got no choice but to progress despite the uncertainty, and accepting that there's likely to be some uncertainty. But to some extent, that's about making sure we've got flexibility within the final contract. I guess the reality is that whatever the government finally requires, there will be a transition period. And I think through this process, having demonstrated this process starting as thoroughly as it has with the Waste Task and Finish group, is that we will be able to demonstrate we haven't just come up with something on a whim, that there has been a very clear scrutiny process that will have arrived at a given set of proposals for the next contract, which I think would be part of our mitigation if there is some element that then needs to be tweaked, shall we say. But I think that's the kind of cleft stick that we're in at the moment, is that we just have to accept that is and we'll have to manage it as part of this process. We've touched on the fact that this is about behaviour change as much as it is about service specification. So it is absolutely critical we get it right and get the resources in place that we need now. Obviously, in addition to the legislative risk, there are risks around what will the markets be in 4 or 5 years' time. There's a very real risk around the timetable, which Kenton has admirably spelt out, that there is no wriggle room anymore in this timetable. What we might have had has potentially been lost, I suppose, partly through COVID and so forth. And that in order to make this work, we really have to engage with our residents effectively and kind of win their hearts and minds, so that there's a not just understanding, but as Councillor Hewitt says, that whatever change comes from this is seen and embraced as the right thing to do for the environment and for us as a county. So I guess that's my final plea, is around making sure we do get resources in place to move this forward, and that everybody understands the decision-making timetable, and that we mitigate any chance of things slipping at all. The other benefit, I think, that if we can get extra resources in place at this point, is, for example, particularly around the household recycling centres, that there are things that we could be doing now if we're moving to a point where we see that as a particular opportunity for the county. But that, along with all the communication issues, we've just got to make sure we've got the right people in place to be able to help move that forward. So I think that's probably it for me, and thank you for your time and attention, and I'll leave you to ponder the voting block or otherwise.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Simons. Lastly, Councillor Hewitt, you wanted to come in?
Because I don't know how these things work, I'm just going to ask this question anyway. So if we do, as a council, an exemplary piece of work, which clearly there's been a lot of validation in the room about this, if we share it with our local members, is it possible that if it was perused over by central government, they might say, we want to support you in this and offer resources? Is that something that officers could consider doing?
Kendon, your thoughts?
Let's see, why not? I mean, we've been engaging with DEFRA through network group meetings on a regular basis, and it's been an interesting process, because, as you might imagine, there are authorities that are already doing this, and there are authorities that are a million miles from getting themselves in place. I think DEFRA are very keen to get views and opinions from local authorities about how they're going to approach this. So I think they'd like to engage with us. Whether they're likely to give us any funding or resources to help, I don't know. But it is part of the strategy. Again, it does say that, resources will be there to support us. Again, we just don't know what or how. So, there's no harm in asking, is there, in every of these situations? So I will certainly leave details of our DEFRA colleagues that we work with, so that, if you wish to engage with them and see whether they can help support us at all, I'm sure that they would be keen to engage with us.
Okay, thank you, Kenton. Right, are there any more comments from the committee members on the proposals before us, the recommendations? And I look to officers. Would we take them all as one block or individual recommendations? Because there are rather a few of them.
Chairman, I've tried to jot down the recommendations as I think I've heard them in the room. Would it be helpful if I pop those up on screen?
Yes, please. Yeah.
So the recommendations that I think I've heard, subject to the committee agreeing or adding more to or taking some out. So there were recommendations around the options going forward into consultation. There was a discussion with the committee members about whether or not all three options should go forward, or whether just the two options go forward with a clear explanation as to why. So there's two recommendations, one of which I think would go forward if the committee are agreeing. So the first would be that as part of the consultation process, there is clear explanation given as to why option one is not being put forward as an option, or alternatively, if the committee were so minded that they did want all three options going forward, the recommendation would read that as part of the consultation, all three of the options set out in the Task and Finish Group report are consulted on.
Okay, so that would be recommendation one that we'd have to vote on.
Yep.
And then the next one.
So the next recommendation, the Task and Finish Group, the committee talked about the need for good communication, particularly around the consultation process. And what I think I've heard is that the Task and Finish Group continue to work with communications on providing expert advice on each of the schemes to ensure public understanding for the preferred option is secured.
Okay. I mean, obviously, we'd have to put this forward as a recommendation, and then members of the Task and Finish group would have to have a say in whether they wish to continue or not.
There was a discussion which, again, committee members would need to consider, which was around the fact that there was a desire, I think, around trying to bring forward as many measures as possible as soon as possible. And one that seemed to gain some traction with the committee was that the reuse of waste is brought forward as quickly as possible at our local household recycling centres. And then finally, there was a discussion whether or not it's a fully formed recommendation or not. I will take the committee's view on that, but that the Task and Finish group report is shared with DEFRA.
Yes, I think that was what's been suggested. Councillor Durkin, you put up your hand.
Yes, Chairman. Bullet point number 2 after or. The Task and Finish group continue to work with. The point I was making was that it's about people like Kenton who have an in-depth knowledge in this, and not necessarily the Task and Finish group. So the waste team could continue to work with the communications and perhaps lead the communications team with putting the correct message out. Thank you, Chairman.
Right. Okay. I see. Right. And then Councillor Simons, were you commenting on the?
Yes, Councillor Durkin's covered my point. Thank you, Chair.
All right. Okay. Excellent. So, are there any more recommendations from the committee with regard to? And look to officers. Are we, apart from the challenge to recommendation 13, would also the resolution of this committee be to endorse the findings of the Task and Finish working party?
I think that would be very helpful. Thank you, Chairman.
So that would be another resolution, John.
So, Chairman, does the above title that the committee approves the Task and Finish group report subject to including those recommendations cover what you would like?
Yes, yeah, I think that's it.
Excellent.
But I think by the looks of things, we would need to bottom out this issue about whether we include option 1 or not. And we've got Councillor Hewitt wanted to come in, and then Councillor Durkin wants to come back.
Well, I hope the Task and Finish group aren't turning in their graves, but Kenton did make the suggestion that a cross-party political group should continue going forward until the whole thing was operational, to basically negotiate and talk about what, because different options will come up at different times and they will need to be discussed. So you can either hand it over completely to the waste team, or you can have member involvement alongside the process, which is what Kenton actually suggested. And I think most of us said, yeah, we'd be prepared to commit to it, but that may have changed.
Well, then can't we do both then? You have officers who are obviously ensuring that there is the communication strategy there, which is absolutely crucial. But then also, if members are willing to continue to serve on that Task and Finish group, to act as assisting officers in that process. I see John's busy amending the.
Sorry, Chairman, I'm not quite sure as to the extent to which that recommendation 19 doesn't cover that. Yeah.
Right. The recommendations.
So recommendation 19 is the Task and Finish group remains in place to support, advise, help progress, any support really that can give to officers in order to take this through to its conclusion, as Councillor Simon said, into implementation. So that's the whole process. I think, rather than just any aspect of it, but it should include things like the communication side of things as well. Sorry, just to butt in there.
So I wonder then, Chair, if the recommendation in the report itself is sufficient, or whether committee members feel anything needs adding to, and this recommendation that we've produced could be taken out or left in.
Chairman, if I might come in there. Yeah. Bullet point 2, where this conversation is at the moment. My point with regard to the communications is, I agree that the extent task and finish group remains as per recommendation 19, but that the waste team take the lead with the information consultation with the public, which could be informed also by the members of the task and finish group. So we take out the reference to the task and finish group, John. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah. And the other thing, Chair, and I put my hand up for, was at the header that the committee approves the task finish group report. Could you perhaps insert in there "and all recommendations"? And that is then without equivocation then.
Apologies, Chair. I don't seem to be able to hear anybody. I'm not sure if there's conversation going on at the moment. I can't hear.
I can't hear anybody either.
I think I certainly can see the mouth of the chair moving, but I don't think there's any sound coming out.
Chair, is it possibly the on-off switch on the lead to your headset that inadvertently got knocked?
Right. Okay. Can everybody hear me now? Yeah, good. Right. So we had Councillor Durkin and then Councillor Bowes. Councillor Durkin, you've got your hand up.
No, I've made my points, Chairman.
Okay.
My final point would be, under those recommendations that John has put forward so eloquently, does the word "or" need to be included?
Is that in relation to the first two recommendations, Councillor Durkin?
The first two recommendations are, I think, as you say, but then we go on to talk for some other things. It's not an "or", it's an "and". Councillor Bowes is not agreeing with that.
I think that the options as I heard them were that there was, I'm not sure whether the committee actually settled on a view as to whether or not all three options go forward for consultation.
That was going to be my point.
Yeah, that's
right.
Yeah, sorry, we need to, before we progress to all agreeing everything else, there has to be a decision on whether the committee feels that option 1 should be included or not. So I think that's a separate vote in its own. And then once that's agreed, then we can en bloc agree all those other options and recommend the recommendations as they stand.
Sorry, Chairman, which of the options would the committee members like removed? Is it the first or the second? Forgive me.
Well, I would suggest that we have to vote a separate item, which is to include option 1 or not. And so I suppose the question to be put is, do we alter recommendation 13?
Chairman, as far as things stand at the moment, I think you've clearly, I believe you're clearly proposing that. I don't know if there's a seconder for that motion.
Well, if we don't have a seconder, then we don't have to vote on it. So is there anybody who is willing to propose that we include option 1 in the consultation? No seconders? No, in that case, then we'll just move to go forward and put the recommendations as the 4 recommendations that we have here in front of us that John has written out. Is it 4? Yep, 4 recommendations. And propose to support the findings of the Task and Finish group. Any more comments on those recommendations as they're being put forward to us? No. Okay, then. So will we be in a position to vote on that recommendation?
Okay, Chair, there are 6 members eligible to vote and they can all vote now.
voting button doesn't seem to be working.
Can I call you back in a few minutes? Thank
you. Doesn't allow me to tick the box, John.
No,
Okay.
I'm not allowed to tick to submit it.
Wonder if we need to relaunch the poll, Sarah?
Yes, I can do that. I can just end and restart it. All votes have now been cast, and I'll return the non-voting members to the room.
Excellent. If I could just propose that we have a 5-minute break to allow everyone a comfort break and to reboil that kettle. And so I would suggest that we restart the meeting at 25 to. Is that sufficient time for everyone? Yeah, so 25 to, just over 5 minutes.
There we go. Just to confirm, Chair, that all votes were in favour of those recommendations.
Thank you very much. And just to confirm to everyone who's just joined us back, we're having a short recess, comfort recess, and we'll be back at 25 to. Thank you.
I'd just like to obviously thank all the members for the consideration you've given for the report, for the Task Force Group report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and all the best to Kenton.
Right. Yes, thank you, and all the best, Kenton. Bye.
Thank you all and welcome back to the meeting. I'd like to welcome everyone back following our short adjournment. And I would like to thank all of those officers for their perseverance while we changed the order of the agenda. So apologies for those officers who've had to wait. But we can now continue with the minerals and waste local plan item. I invite Victoria Eaton, the Senior Planning Officer, to introduce the report. And we're also very lucky to be joined by Kirsten Berry, who's the representative of Hendecker. She can then continue. Please feel free to ask any questions whilst the presentation is going on. And just to note, we are now joined by Councillor Harrington, who's very welcome. He's joined us, and we still have Councillor Hitchener, the leader of the council, and with us as well. So, excellent. Over to officers.
Thank you very much. So today we're looking to ask you to consider the content of the latest version of the Minerals and Waste Local Plan. So this is rather a technical planning document, and it's underpinned by several evidence-based reports. So I do recognise that when you read these, there's a lot of information to take in. And we have Kirsten Berry here of consultancy Hendecker, who has produced the plan for us. So what is the Minerals and Waste Local Plan? Well, it sets out the council's preferred strategy and a framework of planning policies for all our minerals and waste needs in Herefordshire up to 2041. So it's quite important to begin with to understand what kind of document the Minerals and Waste Local Plan is. It's a formal development plan document, and the production of that is highly regulated through legislation. And it has to go through particular stages during which public consultation takes place. So at the moment, we're approaching the Regulation 19 consultation stage, as it's known. That's set out in the Town and Country Planning, Local Planning Regulations of 2012. And it'll be the second and last time that the draft policies and proposals in the plan will be consulted upon with the public. So at this stage of the plan's production, we're going to be asking local communities and businesses and other interested stakeholders to comment on the policy content of the draft plan, but they'll have to do that within a specific remit. And that remit this time round in the public consultation relates to the tests of soundness and also includes legal compliance issues. Now that's all set out through the government's national planning policy framework, but just as a quick overview, the test of soundness would have to show that the plan had been positively prepared. So would the minerals and waste plan meet the need of the county for minerals and waste matters in a sustainable way up until 2041? And secondly, is it justified? So have we looked at alternatives and have we considered all evidence in relation to the matters in hand? Another question is on the test of soundness is whether the plan is deliverable and effective, and also whether it's consistent with national policy and all the up-to-date ones of that. So before I go on, and or Kirsten will go into a bit more detail, the content of the plan, you may be wondering perhaps why is the minerals and waste local plan preparation being continued in light of the government's recent white paper? Well, the consultation white paper sets out planning reform, and if that's enacted, that would result in a complete overhaul of the planning system. And if this planning reform goes ahead, the government has set itself quite a short timescale within which to enact both the primary and secondary legislation that will be needed in order to bring out those changes to the planning system. Because the government has said that it would like to see the first of the new style of these local plans to be adopted before the end of Parliament in 2024. And that's anticipating that these new local plans will be done more quickly in a 30-month time frame. So if you look back from that end of Parliament time, this would mean that the new legislation that's required will need to be enforced by late September of next year, so quite soon. And the government has set out in the white paper that it wants a smooth transition to the new system. And that will mean that they'll set up some transitional arrangements between the old system and the new system. And that'll need to be made ready for plans that are already going through stages of production. As in previous planning reform that's taken place, it's anticipated that if a development plan document, a bit like the minerals and waste local plan, has reached quite a late stage in its production, by that I mean that its regulation stage is going to happen, then if that is done by March next year and submission by June next year, then it's likely that under those transitional arrangements we'll be able to continue with adoption of that plan. So it's our opinion that the minerals and waste local plan should continue to be produced because it will be caught by any such transitional arrangements. And it's quite a technical plan as well, and it's important that we get the policies in place to guide minerals and waste development across the county, because at the moment we don't really have up-to-date policies in planning for minerals and waste. So as I said, we're hoping to get to Regulation 19 consultation in the early part of next year, and submission should be by spring 2021. So we're actually ahead of that little time frame for those transitional arrangements if everything goes to plan. So a bit about what the minerals and waste local plan is, just an overview really. It provides guidance to developers and local communities, as well as the development management officers at the council and other interested parties, on both where and when minerals and waste development can be expected up until 2041. Now, what does that mean? Well, minerals development, we're thinking mainly here of quarrying of sand and gravel and crushed rock in the county. And for waste development, that would include things such as waste recycling and treatment and the disposal of waste. But as well as that, the minerals and waste plan will also direct how such developments will be managed to reduce adverse impacts and to maximise the benefits of those. So far in the mineral waste local plans production, we've been through several stages, and really it all began back in the core strategy examination where it was recommended by the inspector that the minerals and waste policies had to be set out in a separate minerals and waste local plan. So in order to get such a specialist plan in place, we commissioned Hendecker and Kirsten Berry as special minerals and waste planning consultancy, and we appointed them to produce the plan and some parts of its evidence base. And other consultants have also been involved in the production of the evidence-based documents and in the production of the statutorily required sustainability appraisals and habitat regulations assessments. Back in 2016 and 2017, we had two calls for sites for minerals and waste developments. And then after this, in 2017, we had a public consultation on the issues and options on minerals and waste local plan. And then the first time that the public were consulted on the plan's specific policies and proposals was at the beginning of 2019, where they were asked to, the public were asked to comment on the draft minerals and waste local plan. So like I previously mentioned, we've now reached that second publication draft stage with consultation due early next year. And as I said, submission to the Secretary of State in spring next year. It's likely that the examination in public will take place in late summer or autumn of next year, but that depends on the Planning Inspectorate's timetable. And hopefully adoption would be in 2022. In addition to those formal stages of public consultation that I've set out for you, we also had some checks and balances taking place through the process, and that was via a minerals and waste panel, which was made up of local members from different political persuasions. And that panel met on 3 separate occasions, and it considered the production of the draft plans, policies and proposals. So Kirsten Berry of Hendecker is going to tell you a bit more about the changes that were made to the minerals and waste local plan following that draft consultation that took place early in 2019. But just a quick overview of that, we received 56 submissions, some of which raised many, many different points. So a lot of points, more than just 56, were raised during that. We had representations from statutory undertakers such as the Environment Agency, Natural England, Historic England, and as well as from other bodies such as the Mineral Products Association and also obviously members of the public. We've been through all of those and each comment has been reviewed and responded to. And this has resulted then in changes to the draft plan. And now we have the publication draft plan, which you have before you. So really why the item is being brought before General Scrutiny Committee today is prior to the Regulation 19 publication draft plan consultation being approved at full council. We're going to be asking you whether there are any recommendations or suggestions for amendments for the executive to consider, which might strengthen the emerging approach to the minerals and waste planning policy that's been set out in the publication draft plan. So hopefully that provides you with a little overview before I pass you on to Kirsten Berry of Hendecker, and she'll go through with you the more detailed aspects of the plan, and you'll be able to ask any questions of her or any of us after that.
Thank you very much. And over to Kirsten, if she may.
Good afternoon, Chair. Thank you very much for your welcome, and good afternoon to you all. Your report sets out really the key changes that were made to the plan following the last period of consultation. I think one thing that's probably important to raise that's not in the report is the draft that went out for consultation was deliberately a full draft of the plan. So it set out very much all of the supporting text, the policies in full, and all of the sort of surrounding explanatory text that you would expect to see in a plan. And that approach was really quite deliberate. We wanted to get as full a plan out to consultation as possible early on in the process so that we could get really well-informed responses back to it. We had a lot of some really good responses back to that draft, and they have initiated some quite important changes to the plan. Nothing that has really changed the general direction of the plan overall, but some key tweaks and updates and reflections that have been picked up. So I'm just going to skip very quickly through some of the ones that are identified in your report because they're already presented there. Probably one of the key changes is in relation to unconventional hydrocarbons, so fracking, as it's commonly known. When we prepared the draft plan, national policy was very much recognising the or presenting an approach of recognising the benefits of using fracking and onshore oil and gas for transition to low carbon. In ministerial written statements like last year, that intention has been removed from national policy statement. I'm very much aware of the resolutions within Herefordshire that are against fracking, and recognising that actually from the evidence we have, it looks very unlikely that you would actually experience an application for working unconventional hydrocarbons in Herefordshire. So recognising the update in the national position, we decided to take that policy out altogether. It reflects local circumstances more closely and it aligns with the national picture. So we will retain reference to fracking in general within some of the energy mineral general policies, but there's no specific policy on unconventional hydrocarbons now. So that's been removed. So that will be quite a significant change that some people will see. A big one, which I know is really important in Herefordshire, is about the policy on agricultural waste. Now, this is really unusual. I mean, I think it's probably unique to have a policy on agricultural wastes within a minerals and waste local plan, but certainly very unusual. In Herefordshire, though, I feel it's really appropriate. You're a very agricultural county. You have the local issue of nutrients within the River Lug SAC catchment. And the evidence is increasingly showing a very clear link between the way that waste, particularly natural wastes on agricultural units, are managed and the relationship with nutrients in the River Lug. And the Minerals Waste Local Plan is just one element of trying to address this issue. It's certainly not be all and all. It's certainly not the answer. It's not the panacea. It can't deal with the issue in totality, but it is one part of the puzzle. And so that's why we have included in the Minerals and Waste Local Plan a policy specifically requesting information on how wastes within agricultural units will be managed. We are limited within the Minerals and Waste Local Plans to what role it can take. It needs to be focused on the land use implications of waste. And so it would come from an application for development. But we have got that included in the Minerals and Waste Local Plan. And that has been tweaked, has been changed a bit in response to the consultation responses received, partly correcting some errors that I put in there originally. That was my fault. I misread the evidence at the time, but that's been completely updated with all the latest evidence on the impact of agriculture on River Lug. And it's also, the policies sought to be sort of tightened up a bit generally. So you will see some changes within that policy, but it's a really unusual position to have it. There was some tweaks around policy W6, which is about construction, demolition, and excavation waste. We felt it was really important that that policy was clarified, really, in terms of its intent. So that's really the main changes around that. We've had much more response in terms of the minerals policies and minerals effects than waste side. And I think that's probably partly because the Minerals Products Association is quite a strong trade body for the minerals industry. And they've submitted quite a lot of comments about wanting more quantity of minerals be set out within the policy and issues around safeguarding. I've had a look at their comments. I've had a look at the evidence that we have, and I've made some slight changes to the policy, which go some way to addressing the minerals, the MPA's concerns about safeguarding, about the impact of other development on quarrying operations. So they should feel they have some greater safeguarding in terms of reducing the potential for impact. But I actually felt that a lot of their comments that wanted much more explicit and wanted greater tonnages of quarrying being set out in the policies was pushing those policies too far. The policies are positively written, and I think already reflect the evidence base appropriately in terms of the amount of minerals that we would expect to be worked within Herefordshire over the plan period. But there has been some sort of clarifications and tweaks in those policies. Site assessment was a reasonably big topic. We've had no comment on any of the sites that we have not proposed to put forward. Had some comments on those sites that we have proposed to allocate, which is not surprising. Some of it was a bit of clarity and additional information, and that's all great, and that's all been picked up and included. We've had quite a lot of discussion with Historic England, who raised some concerns about the approach that we had used and wanted an extra level of detail, but recognised as well in our discussions with them that this is the plan making stage. We're not at an application stage, and so the amount of assessment that we can put for each site needs to be proportionate to where we're at in terms of plan making. However, we did go away and we did some more work looking at heritage assets, but also the other sort of environmental topics that we consider when we look at sites for allocating in policy. So things like flood risk, biodiversity, and that's all been written up into a supplementary sites report, which has been made available to you. We have had a follow-up conversation with Historic England about our additional work that we've undertaken, and they are generally content now that we have done what they would expect to see. That's an informal comment at this point. They will respond formally when the whole lot goes out for consultation later. During that conversation with them, they raised some other informal comments, primarily around how the plan addresses a balance between, for example, when you come to restoring a site, there might be some really important heritage, historical aspects of that site, which need to be considered against potentially the benefits of floodplain alleviation and restoration. So historically, quite often, particularly sand and gravel sites are flooded, left open as open bodies of water, because that's useful. But the Historic England's point is in certain settings that may not be appropriate, may be more appropriate for the heritage value of the landscape, that it's restored to agriculture. So I've woven in some additional words about that within the plan to sort of make clear to developers that the council will consider those potential sort of conflicts across environmental topics really carefully. It's not that one will always win out over the other. So we very much sought to address Historic England's comments early on and prepare those within the plan. The Environment Agency also made a number of comments, all of which have been addressed. They were really sort of clarifications required within the plan about terminology. Nothing that really changed the plan strategically. Through the report, see what else we cover. We had a lot of comments again on mineral side in terms of how we have forecast what we think the future demand for minerals would be. Had very little comment on waste needs assessment in terms of what future waste demands might be. We use those comments to go back through and, well, first of all, the first thing to say is in terms of both minerals and waste forecasting, in preparing the draft plan that's in front of you today, we went back to basics. We started again, looked at all the data afresh. Previous iterations, we just updated elements of it, but for this one, to make sure we had a complete up-to-date evidence base, we went back to basics on both of them, started afresh. Certainly in the waste assessment, we could see that actually our projections were sort of what's happening. So we've got quite a lot of confidence that we've got waste sort of about right. Minerals, it's very much harder to tell because the data is even less clear and comprehensive than it is for waste. But we have reviewed everything. We have extended the end dates to 2041 to reflect the revised end date of the plan itself. And we have sought to look at any new growth forecasts that have come in over time. So again, we've used a complete up-to-date evidence base and built in a bunch of sensitivity. And in order to be sort of present a positive framework and to provide for opportunities, we have sought to take sort of the upper forecasts of minerals and waste demand going forward. That gives you as an authority greatest amount of flexibility overall going forward in the plan. But that work's been done quite comprehensively. So that has resulted in some updates in terms of the policy wording about the amount of minerals and waste capacity we're looking at going forward. The other thing which has happened is the strategic flood risk assessment, which looked at the sites to be allocated specifically rather than the county in general as a whole, has been completed and has been signed off by the Environment Agency. Again, that hasn't changed sort of the strategic direction or the overall approach of the plan, but it has resulted in just a few tweaks and clarifications that we make clear alongside each of the sites that are allocated going forward. Just sort of making sure that we pick up advice from the SFRA in terms of what we might expect in terms of flood risk assessment or what end use for sites, how we might expect that sort of element to be addressed within any planning application going forward.
We're very conscious of the flooding issue in flooding in general in Herefordshire.
Yeah, no, it's been looked at very carefully, and that report has been signed off by the Environment Agency as well. So yeah, you have confidence that's been pretty scrutinised. It was really interesting actually hearing your conversation about the waste strategy going forward. The Minerals and Waste Local Plan has been written very much trying to embrace and deliver in a land use format things like circular economy and resource efficiency. And to the extent that it can, because actually really if you do circular economy and resource efficiency properly, you shouldn't really be using much land, but to the extent that it can as a land use policy, it has included policies to encourage both resource efficiency and circular economy. And we spent quite a lot of time in the early days speaking to a number of different parties to try and understand how we could best deliver things like the circular economy within Herefordshire. And one of the comments which was made fairly broadly across all the parties we spoke to was try and geographically group different parts of the jigsaw again so that they can work together. So that's one of the reasons why for things like waste management facilities, built waste management facilities, we've really looked at your strategic industrial estates so that then you can try and get those different parties to work together. So you might have research, or you might have people who are manufacturing, have some waste products, and then might have a waste treatment facility, and you might even have a small incinerator on site which can produce energy, which could then go back into the industrial estate. You don't have to rely on fossil fuels for energy. So it's that sort of thing we've really tried to build into the policy to deliver that within Herefordshire. I think that's all I have to say, Chair. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you very much for that introduction from your point of view as the producer of the report. I look to Scrutiny Committee members now to, if you'd like to raise any questions or have any lines of inquiry you'd like to, Councillor Bowes to start with.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. I tried to read it several times and must say 90% of it was over my head, so I had to get some help from Vicky, so thank you for that. I just got a couple of questions. You said, or Vicky said, that it provides guidance for the public and for parish councils and councils and things. Doesn't it need to have some sort of summary document that makes it legible and understandable to those people? Because I'm sure if you're a planner or involved in this sort of thing, that document is lovely and it means everything to everyone. But as a member of the public who knows really nothing about minerals and waste, that to me, it doesn't give me any guidance at all as Joe Public or as a parish councillor as to what is involved. It's just in so much depth that I don't think anybody would be able to understand it unless they work in your field. And if we're trying to say that's guidance for the public and parish councils, I don't think they'll understand it either. So that was one of my questions. Do you want me to go on, or should we do one at a time?
Do one at a time, I think, probably is the best way of...
It may well be that you're Kevin wants to come back on this. My commission was really to prepare you a planning policy development plan document that will deliver the function of that document, which it will provide information to public and parish councils in terms of things like identifying where we see our preferred locations for facilities, so that they have early knowledge of that. And they've been widely consulted upon and have been able to make their comments known about whether they support those allocations or not. Actually, we've not had a lot of objections to them, far fewer than I've had in working on similar plans elsewhere. We've had some concerns about some of the sites and some of the parish councils, and we've sought to address those concerns within the policy to the extent that we can, but we've had very few outright objections.
Do you think that could be because people haven't had the knowledge to understand that, you know, they've looked at it and thought, I don't understand any of this, and just left it?
I don't think so, because we've had the events where people have been invited to come along, and we've been there to talk to them about it face to face, and have done presentations and things. And because it's not something I've come across before, and I'd be surprised if Herefordshire residents were not able to understand it any more than anywhere else I've worked in. So I get that. I think the evidence-based documents are much more technical and difficult to get into than the plan itself. And I've deliberately tried to write it clearly and concisely, not only so that it's accessible, but so that it's more readily applicable, you know, so that your officers can more clearly say, no, look, the plan to developers, you know, the plan says this is for a simple language, this is what this means.
Can I suggest, though, that I mean, obviously the officers have been commissioned to write a policy document, but is it, Councillor Bowes, is it your perhaps recommendation that a summary guide be produced, just that's easily rather than the whole policy document itself, but something like an executive summary be provided for parish councils and lay members of the public who might. So perhaps if we think about that, may be a recommendation. Councillor Stark.
Thank you, Chair. My question is really targeted towards Vicky and timing. The white paper on planning is obviously a fast-moving document, and as you said, Vicky, they do want to actually move quite quickly on it. What happens if the plan doesn't meet the timetable to be included in the transitional arrangements that might be put in place and before the white paper is implemented? Does it just fall?
No, it wouldn't just fall. I mean, we'd have to make sure that in any plan that was subsequently written, that the evidence base behind it was up to date, etc. But all the work that we've done so far should not suddenly be out of date at that specific time. But I really do think that the stages that we've been through and the work that's been done to lead us up to this point is sufficient for us to be confident that we will hit the timetable, particularly as it's going to take so long for the government legislation in place. So I think we have got a couple of months leeway either side of that deadline, and I think that we will get there. But yes, if we don't, and if we have to start another minerals and waste local plan or a different form of minerals and waste local plan, And the evidence base, as I said, that's been done so far will not suddenly become out of date. We'll just have to make sure that we did up-to-date work on it. But it's quite a specific area of policy, minerals and waste planning. And it's unlikely that the principles behind it would change very much between one planning system and another.
Okay. Councillor Bowes, you had more than one question, did you not? Sorry.
Yeah, just a couple more, sorry. The anaerobic digesters, it says, so do farmers produce enough waste to power those digesters? Or will they have to grow additional crops to feed it? Does the power go back to the farmer? And do farmers get subsidies from those digesters?
Who's in a position to answer that question?
I'm happy to take them on if that's right, Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
So anaerobic digesters come in quite a range of different sizes. And they could be, you could have a very small one, which just deals with farmyard manure type wastes. Actually, AD systems are quite complex things, and they actually generally work better with a bit of a mix of wastes, that term in its most general way, which might comprise farmyard manure type thing, but also actually things like beet, silage, crops. And this can be put to good effect on farms because you obviously need to grow different cereals and crops. So you need to put different crops on your fields in rotation. Sorry, that's the phrase I'm looking for. So that you can break down disease cycles and things. And what some farmers do is they'll put farmyard manure in, but they might grow maize one year as a way of giving that field, that piece of land, a bit of a break, grow maize, and then that maize gets added into the anaerobic digester. And that's part of the crop rotation that goes on within agricultural units. That's not that it's being grown to feed the AD, it's part of the agricultural rotation that would go on anyway. If it wasn't going into the AD facility, it might be sent off farm for some other use. Okay. Also, some AD systems are fed on a mix of food wastes as well as farm wastes. So AD systems come in all sorts of different shapes, sizes, configurations. Some of the power hopefully would go back to the farm, making the farm more sustainable, having a closed loop in terms of waste management and energy provision. I would suspect, though, that most AD systems, even small ones, would produce too much power just for one farm unit, so it would be exported. There's lots of different ways you can do that. The most normal way would be for the gas to go through some sort of cleanup system and then go into the grid as gas. But you can take off heat, you can take off there's a bit of growth in using gas for vehicles as well. So there's lots of different ways of using them. And they used to, anybody who had started up an AD system used to be able to get subsidies through the contract for difference system, whether you were a farmer or whoever you were. If you had an AD system, you could tap into that layer of subsidy to help fund that development. But that's no longer applicable. So as far as I'm aware, farmers would not currently get any subsidy for it. And you might well find, I mean, I know within Herefordshire, you've had quite a growth of AD systems within the county. I would be surprised if that was sustained because that subsidy system has now ceased. So
the old ones may get a subsidy, but any new ones wouldn't.
That's right. Yeah.
Thank you.
So, and they cost a lot of money. They're not cheap bits of kit to set up. And I would imagine a lot of farmers would struggle to do that without those subsidies.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm conscious of the time, but because we're fast approaching the 3-hour mark, but we must press on. So if we can be mindful of the time, but I really want to make sure everybody's having their say. Councillor Stark and then Councillor Wilding.
Yes, I was just wondering, Vicky, since this particular plan came out of the core review examination, whether there was a fixed budget for developing this plan, or whether it's just been, shall we say, funded from whatever the general fund was for the core review.
Kevin, would you mind answering that one for me, please?
Yeah, no, this has just been funding really out of the base budget for the strategic planning base budget over the time, together with whatever monies have been set aside specifically for things like developing the evidence base and so on. So there was not a fixed budget for this work.
Okay, there's your answer, Councillor Stark.
Well, was it necessary then to go to full council to have this as a line of expenditure anywhere, or is it just accepted that this is a normal approach?
Well, it's a required part of the development plan to have a minerals and waste plan. Okay. That was confirmed at the examination in public, so it was part of that process.
Okay. Councillor Wilding.
Thanks, Chair. Maybe I'm being a little bit picky about this, I don't know. You mentioned removing the stuff basically about fracking. I just wondered if there was specifically something in there to actually say we absolutely don't want fracking at all. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is it mentions sustainability lots of times in the report, as does the new government white paper and stuff. But I still don't see anywhere in the indexes of these reports that actually gives sustainability as a word and a definition enough weight to actually direct council officers to make decisions based on sustainability being an absolute thing, and natural capital and all those sort of things as being the main driver to decide how decisions are made. I hope that wasn't too garbled. Okay.
So there may be a recommendation there about being more explicit about sustainability. Councillor Hewitt.
Yeah, and here's me being very picky, so you'll have to excuse me. So I think it would be a misrepresentation to say that growing maize in order to make sustainable energy production in an anaerobic digester is a break in the land. In fact, maize is a very hungry crop, and the machinery that's used to actually produce it compacts the land. We're mostly on clay in our county, and the runoff from clay compaction from the growth of maize to feed a digester in order that somebody gets their RHI payment is unsustainable for this county. And that's where we come back to this issue about sustainability. Further, I'd say that most farms are not linked into a gas network. So actually what they do with the gas is a bit of an issue. And the next thing that I'd say is that I'm concerned about the safety, and I would like to have seen a report on the general safety of anaerobic digesters, because we've had a massive pollution incident on the Linfey, which feeds into the Wye, and we don't have the evidence yet, but in 2016, I think it was a biodigester that actually caused that pollution incident. And we need, I think, somewhere in this report, although everybody rubs their hands with glee and says, oh yes, this is part of the circular model, there are dangers attached to anaerobic digestion. I mean, we've got A1 agricultural land, which should be used for growing crops in this county, and it's growing maize to feed a digester so that somebody gets their RHI payment. And I just feel, you know, maybe when we get to the food waste processing in this county and a requirement to do it, then farmers, this could be the win situation. Farmers will then think, oh, actually, I can then release my land for growing a crop rather than to feed into the digester, because I'm genuinely using a waste stream then. Anyway, that was a big diatribe, so please excuse me, but I feel they're quite important issues.
Thank you, Councillor Hewitt. I've got a few comments to make myself, but I'm conscious of the fact that Councillor Simons wanted to make a contribution. Was it a quick question or?
Thank you, Chairman. No, it was just a response to the points made by Councillor Bowes and Hewitt in relation to anaerobic digestion, where it was something we did look at on the waste task and finish group, and we're aware that there is a potential significant capacity across the county in AD, and one of the next phases of that project will be when we start looking at disposal options, was to look at whether we can localise collection and make use of either existing undercapacity or, as Councillor Hewitt says, divert maize or other things in favour of food from domestic waste. So we are certainly aware that that is an opportunity and is something that I think we'll be looking to develop as the procurement process goes forward for the disposal side of the waste service. That was all I was going to say. Thank you, Chairman.
Well, thank you for that contribution and that clarification. I've got some points that I wish to raise. So that forgive me, they're like what you'd find with a red pen. So can everyone get at the ready for the points I'm going to make, because they're alterations to the wording of the plan that I'm thinking about. The first one, and it's a very, very small issue, but this is a county plan, so it's really important. Page 70 on the agenda papers. In 4.3, it's spatial strategy. It says Hereford, Leominster and the market towns. Now, Leominster's a wonderful place and it always deserves a mention, but there are the 5 market towns plus Hereford, and I'm not quite sure why Leominster's singled out as being Leominster, Hereford and then market towns. For a county-wide appeal, I would have suggested it would be Hereford and the 5 market towns rather than Leominster. That would be my first very small point to raise, but I think it's an important one. On page 73, it's paragraph 5.2.6, where it says about expecting developers will consult. My question would be, do we need to make that paragraph more explicit in our policy requirement? I don't know the answer to that, but I'm just saying it is expected. Wouldn't it be that developers are required or so it's a question. I'm not sure of the wording or of the answer to that, but if that's what we really want, do we need to change that in such a way that it's really explicit that that's what we expect? This is very topical. On page 81, it's talking about car boots and jumble sales, well-known form of waste reuse. Do we really mean that car boot sales sell waste? I don't think we do. We just mean second-hand. I think we mean second-hand products rather than waste. I don't know. Maybe that's that was something that we might want to change. On page 82, it's the policy SP1. It starts off with Herefordshire, point 1, Herefordshire Council encouraging waste prevention by. My query there is, when setting out policy, we're saying what we expect decisions to be made in the context of, but this reads like it's what we're going to do. But really, should we be saying, no, this is what we expect you to be doing, and this is our policy framework in which we want that to happen? So again, I don't know the answer to that question, but is that an unusual way of setting out our policy by saying what we're going to do rather than what we expect others to do. And then lastly, on page 91, and it's where the policies stipulate things. For example, policy SP4, it says development that requires reclamation will only be permitted. And because I have a planning background, when I see the word permitted, I see that as the general permitted development order, which is giving permission automatically to things through the permitted development system. Whereas in a policy document that's granting planning permission, because planning permission needs to be required, I would be using language like granted or supported, because legally permitted in planning means something else. So that's just that is just something I would, and if you read the council's core strategy, the language is about supporting development or granting rather than permitting, because in planning law, permitted means something different. So those were the comments or suggestions that I would be putting forward. I don't know if officers wanted to comment on any of those points.
I've got a list of what I think were the questions that I was going to respond to, if that's okay.
Yes, please do so.
So the plan does not explicitly state no fracking in Herefordshire, primarily because that's not an appropriate thing for the plan to say. Because I can see Councillor Bowes asking why. Because policy should be written in a positive framework. It should be setting out what we do want to happen, where we want it to happen, why we want it to happen. Not having a policy on fracking is going to make it very clear, and the evidence base, which talks about the whole fracking, to use its common parlance, issue and the fracking policy, will make it very clear to any developer that it's not really a very welcome development in Herefordshire. Not having a policy on it will make it clear that we have no policy intent for the development of unconventional hydrocarbons in Herefordshire. It is included within the general mineral policy, but what that requires, in short, is that if you are going to present such a proposal, you have to show how it's going to give benefits overall. So it's quite a tough hurdle. It's a reasonable hurdle to have to cross, but you're going to have to show how using a fossil fuel is going to give you carbon benefits at the end of the day. Not very easy square circle. Sustainability. The plan has been written with the intention of the policies achieving sustainable development. I don't think we can have a policy which says your application will be determined against the principle of sustainability, because that principle means lots of different things to lots of different people. But what we have done is set out within the policies what we expect in order to deliver what we see in the policy making team, and taking on consultation representations, what is meant by sustainability. So, for example, we've got policy SP4 in front of us from Councillor Lester's comments about site reclamation. That requires that reclamation happens as soon as possible, so that land isn't left unused and not in an optimal condition. Green infrastructure is introduced at the earliest appropriate opportunities. That might be biodiversity priorities, it might be flood management, it might be heritage, it might be public open space or public access, which is all about sort of social well-being, which is an element of sustainability which is often overlooked. So the policies have very much been written with sustainability at their heart. They've been through one lot of sustainability assessment, and we've incorporated recommendations from that. And I think we've been clear about within the policy about trying to really optimise the benefits that we can from development, so that we can achieve that aim. The Comments on AD, we could probably spend another 3 hours debating pros, cons, all the rest about AD. The one bit I do want to address is about safety. I've been working as a professional planner and in minerals and waste for 20 plus years. I'm aware of one anaerobic digestion facility that split, that had any real sort of safety issue. That was a long time ago. As with all technologies, development is constantly moving and they are improving. AD plants now generally have two sort of skins to them. So if the inner one broke, you still got another one. Many now actually have a third skin to them as well. And also they are generally required to sit within sites that have bunds around them, so that in the not likely event that there was a split or an incident, any materials within that facility would be contained on site so that it shouldn't spill out over. So, you know, AD is like any technology. Yes, there are risks with it, but I think actually it's got a pretty good safety record. Councillor Lester, you made various comments, tweaks of wording, which I don't on face of it have any concern with. I'm sure we can make those fairly easily. You had two questions though, I think. One was about paragraph 5.2.6 and what we expect developers to do in terms of consultation. That paragraph was deliberately written like that at a fairly high level, so it makes clear our expectation that developers will undertake consultation. The specifics about what sort of consultation should be undertaken will be set out in your statement of community involvement, and the detail is there. I don't want to repeat it here because you might change your expectations in the future, but what we do here is just make clear that there is that expectation. The SCI is where they'll get that detail from. And in terms of policy SP1, yes, absolutely, that policy is setting out very clearly what Herefordshire Council is going to do. The planning policy applies to everybody. It's about land use, applies to developers, but it applies to all parties who have a role to play in achieving the sustainable outcomes that we want. And they are the roles that the policy is saying Herefordshire Council will play in achieving these outcomes. It's not a common policy that you don't have a lot of policies directed at councils, but it's certainly not uncommon to see a council setting out clearly the role that it will take within a policy area, and I certainly have used that or similar wording in other plans that I've written.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Durkin, and then we've got Councillor Wilding.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a point about distribution. If we look at 1.2.3 on page 43, and looking at the Herefordshire Customer Services Centre, I cannot see there the Ross-on-Wye Library, which I believe is a customer service centre. This is very north-centric, as it were. Would it not be inappropriate to include Ross-on-Wye with the paper copies of the document? Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, that's absolutely fine. We'll add that in.
Okay, Councillor Wilding.
Thanks. I just wanted to come back on the fracking and the sustainability. So the fracking, yeah, so there is no policy and we don't want to put in anything that's a negative, but I believe a policy that said we won't have fracking at all ever would be a positive. It wouldn't be a negative. So I'd still like to see something like that. And you mentioned, you know, it's a high hurdle for people to get over, but surely I'd like to see the hurdle removed completely. So there is no option to get over a hurdle at all. So that's that. Then the sustainability, you said different things to different people. That's exactly why I think you need something in the glossary which goes on about the term, so that you can absolutely nail down what we're talking about when we mention sustainability.
Councillor Wilding, on those two specific points, can you think of, obviously then you would like a recommendation. Is there any way you could just think about what recommendation you would like to make on those specific points?
Well, the first one I think is pretty easy.
Yeah.
We have a policy which absolutely says no to fracking, not just in the short term, which I think it mentions somewhere in one of the things I was reading, says, but possibly in the long term, it's unlikely, but we might. But, you know, I'd like to see that removed and just say, under no circumstances.
Okay, well, if we have that as a recommendation, then the officers will know that that's something that needs to be considered.
Yeah, that would be my recommendation.
Okay, Councillor Hewitt.
I'd like to go back to policy W3, agricultural waste management, and I welcome that we're underpinning this policy is an understanding that, you know, anything that's put on the land actually percolates through to our groundwater and then into our catchment, and that's creating a big problem for us in Herefordshire and has really created a huge problem for the River Wye SAC this year. But what one of the things that I thought could be a positive policy point in here is to say that anaerobic digestion will be permitted when it's not near a watercourse, for instance. That would be a good idea. And the other thing I wanted to know is that what research was done in relation to intensive units being not co-equal with their spreading area. So if you have a small farm that puts in an intensive unit in order to maximize their own business, they're going to produce a lot more manure or slurry. And slurry, by the way, is pretty poisonous to the land, you know, because it comes from silage, and then it's acidic and it really damages the carbon cycle in the land. So it's not good stuff. So let's just have a think about if the amount of waste that's being produced on a very small area is not co-equal to their spreading area, how do we make a policy that says, I suppose it's just here, isn't it, that they have to produce a location for where their waste is going to go to. Could you just talk a little bit more about that? I'd like to understand it.
Kirsten, you're happy to take on that point directly?
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. So the short answer to your question is I haven't looked at livestock unit size or farm unit size and area of spreading across the land. Data probably is out there, but you know, farm units can change over time. They can change what they're doing with the land over time, and it's a level of detail which I think doesn't really move this policy forward anywhere. What we do require, what we do set out, the policy basically asks that if you are putting forward a development proposal on your farm, you need to tell us how your natural and non-natural wastes will be managed. And part of the information that can be provided to do that would be a manure management plan. And that then would provide that information that's relevant to that unit at that time. So it would come through, but I think to request that specifically as part of a planning policy would be stretching the remit of planning policy a bit far. And I'm not sure it would really take it anywhere. And the thing I come back to is to remind you all that this is one element of a number of different bodies who are looking at this issue and who are responsible for the regulation of agricultural wastes. The Environment Agency actually has a bigger, arguably stronger, more direct remit than we do in planning, but I think this is a reasonable and proportionate way for the planning system to play a role, and I think it's appropriate within Herefordshire. It's quite locally. This policy is really locally specific. I've not written a policy like this in any other waste plan that I've worked on.
Okay, thank you. Right, can we just pause for thought there and think about what recommendations we've actually got at the moment, John?
Okay, I'll share what I've jotted down on screen, and I'll just sharing that now. So the recommendations I think I've heard, Chair, are as follows. That a plain English and practical guidance executive summary document be produced to support the report. That a more explicit definition with links to the examples of acceptable sustainable development within the context of this report be included. That the minerals and waste local plan policy goes further and is strengthened to make it clear that there is no scope for fracking unconventional hydrocarbon extraction in Hereford. Copies of the report be included in the Ross-on-Wye Library Customer Services Centre. And then, subject to your views, Councillor Lester, your alterations I've tried to capture here, which I wasn't sure that they were actual recommendations or they were information we could supply to Hendekia and Victoria after the meeting, just as points of clarity, correction.
Yes, I mean, I didn't need to make a formal recommendation about just word changes, but is that the recommendations? I can only see A, B, C.
Yes, beg your pardon, they've dropped off screen. So A was page 70 on the agenda papers, page 73, page 81, car boots and jumble sales, it's not waste. Page 82 should be rephrased to say this is what we expect others to be doing. And I think it was, although Kirsten, I think you'd suggested it was SP1 rather than SP4. I wasn't quite sure which one it was.
Well, no, on SP1, it was whether Herefordshire Council plays a part in its policy aspirations. So Kirsten's clarified that point for me because I wasn't sure. And then we may professionally lock swords with whether you should use the word permitted or supported or granted. But it was just a point that I made really in that we see permitted as being used in the PD regime, the permitted development regime. So it was just, you are granting permission or supporting applications in policy context in this, but I mean, that's something just to take on board, and whether it's adopted or not is another matter, but it doesn't need to form a formal recommendation.
Okay. So in that context then, with the committee's agreement, I think we've got 4 recommendations.
Okay, so if we can come back to the committee, does anybody feel as though there are any other recommendations that we should be making? One point, Kirsten, if I could just raise, the policy refers to 106 contributions, and the white paper is talking about getting rid of them all altogether. Is that something we need to address in this policy, or is that just something we just have to accept gets changed when we're clear on what the white paper says?
Thank you, Chair. I would be tempted to go with your latter suggestion. We leave it, and everybody understands what Section 106 is. If the white paper gets to a point at which we see there's clearly a different terminology should be used, then we can easily change that. I'm sure any examination inspector would pick up on that.
Okay.
Fairly straightforward modification.
Okay then, right. Thank you for that. If we've got any other recommendations.
I've got a question, Chairman. My comment about not having papers in Ross-on-Wye Library, is that the norm that the library at Ross-on-Wye is left out, as opposed to just an omission on this document for this type of consultation or any consultation?
I think it was just an accidental omission rather than anything.
Okay.
More.
Okay.
I want to make sure they are fully knowledgeable.
Yeah. And I think I've got hands raised from Councillor Hewitt and then Councillor Wilding.
Just taking the advice that it has to be positively written, I was looking at the hydrocarbons. Can we not just say for the duration of this policy of this what do you call it? For this strategy, hydrocarbons remain in the ground in Herefordshire? So that we're not saying a not, we're saying we've taken a positive policy to leave the hydrocarbons in the ground.
Okay, look to officers for their comments.
My unmute button. I I think the way the policy is written presents an appropriate, reasonable proportion, sound, justifiable, able to be evidenced approach. I think if we start straying into that sort of language, I think we will struggle. I think it would be a difficult position to defend at examination. We have set out in the evidence base the position that Herefordshire Council takes on fracking. We have amended the plan recently to pick up the changes to the NPPF. The policy, I've just got it in front of me, it's policy M1. It says that we'll be restricting the extraction of hydrocarbons, either that within the surface coal resource areas or to the pedal block, which is the hydrocarbon block, and requiring compelling reasons to demonstrate that the use of any hydrocarbon is necessary, acceptable, and provides national, local, or community benefits which clearly outweigh the likely impacts, including the greenhouse gas emissions associated with both the extraction and the use of hydrocarbons for energy. I think it'd be quite difficult to demonstrate those compelling reasons. I professionally think that actually the plan as it's written sets out the appropriate policy framework for this issue. I think if you as a committee require more, that's something that would need some careful thinking and could potentially derail the process overall, because we'd need to think about how we'd evidence that and justify it.
Okay.
So, sorry, could I just add a little bit there?
Yes, Kevin, please do so.
Yeah, I think Kirsten's right. I think we're straying there into something that would be clearly contrary to national policy if we go any further than how the policy is written, which would ultimately potentially lead to the plan being found unsound. So,
so your recommendation would be to take out option 3.
Well, clearly this is your recommendations to
of course,
but yes, yeah.
But if your concern is that it could derail the process because it would be thought to be unsound, the committee needs to know that now before they take a vote on that.
That would be my advice. Yes.
Okay, so that's the advice we're being given from officers. And Councillor Wilding, you're next.
Well, that's quite appropriate then, isn't it? Well, I'm just at a loss to know how you can proceed with something if you don't include that. See why you're saying that it needs to be taken out, but at the same time, it seems to me that you're just leaving a space for someone to be able to try and do that. But my hand was actually up because I was just thinking, I don't see much mention of natural capital in the report, and it just feels like maybe there needs to be some reference to natural capital being something, a driver for deciding when we give permission for these sort of places, because they, to get to the stuff below the surface, maybe they're going to have to destroy what's on top of the surface. But and back to the fracking, I'll just allow whatever needs to be done for us to vote on this. Thanks.
Well, I mean, the recommendations there, we can vote on these recommendations individually. And the question for the committee is, do we need to be any more explicit than the way the policy is worded? And the challenge would be, if we are more explicit, officers are saying that it could make the plan unsound. So that's and these are recommendations to the decision makers. These aren't the decisions themselves. So it's, that's what's important for the committee to get their heads round.
Okay, I sort of understand that. Perhaps it needs to just say something like, we'd like to see something like this. We recognise that it would make the policy unsound, but we just feel like it's worth mentioning. I don't know, something like that.
Can I just have an explanation as to how it makes the policy unsound? Because I don't think the public would understand that, and I certainly don't understand it. I don't understand why it creates an unsound base for the policy, and this is where I need a really clear explanation, please.
Okay, Kevin, you've got the challenge, a really clear explanation.
well, Vicky at the start went through the various tests of soundness that the plan has to pass. One of those is it has to be consistent with national policy, and national policy wouldn't allow such an outright ban on fracking at this time, in my view. I don't know whether Kirsten would agree with that or not, but that's my view. How national policy is written wouldn't allow such an absolute ban to be included within the document.
I would agree with what Kevin said there. Sorry, Chair, but coming straight back.
No, absolutely.
We can see within the National Planning Policy Framework that the removal of text that formally required us to recognise the benefits of onshore oil and gas working, that text was removed by ministerial written statement. So it's sort of slightly backdoor route, if you like. Government has never made an outright policy statement that this is the position. It's just removed it via ministerial written statement, and there is no national policy which says there will be no onshore oil and gas development. So for us to say that would put us, as Kevin has said, at odds with the national position. Having said that, I really do. My professional opinion is that the policy position we have, it should be pretty clear to any developers that it's not a welcome development in this area, and it's yeah. So I don't think it should be seen as an open door in any way.
Okay. Well,
so all it's saying to developers is that they could challenge that, couldn't they? They're saying basically they could go look at the fact that it's only been removed by ministerial written statement and think, well, it's not in the NPPF, so we're going to challenge Herefordshire Council. Am I right or not?
I don't think so, because the policies is written is aligned with the national policy position, and if so they could object. I mean, developers could come to the examination and say they wanted the policy rewritten, so it did reintroduce fracking, and we would explain all the reasons why we don't have one. But if any developer wanted to bring forward a development for fracking, they would have to provide compelling reasons to demonstrate why it was necessary, acceptable, and provides national and local community benefits over and above the likely impacts. So they've got quite a tough test there.
So
the research showed that it wasn't a big resource anyway. Is that right?
Yes. Yep. Yeah. Nobody. There was no uptake of the license that was offered.
Can I just say I like what John's just put there, and he could just add something about and urge the government to come out with a stronger policy itself, so that we can include it in our policy.
Okay, well, that's the recommendation that's currently being typed out.
Chairman, can I make a comment here?
I was going to say, sorry, Councillor Durkin needs to come in. He's had his hand up for quite some time.
On this topic, as has quite rightly been said, we must accord with national policy, because if we don't, we'll be open to challenge, and we wouldn't have the backup of the government to fall back on. So I think that the wording is sufficiently strong enough to enable any developer to jump through an extortionate number of hoops to actually get anything through. But we could at least fall back on the statement that this is national policy. It's government edict, not the local authority.
Okay, right. I would agree with that. So we have 4 recommendations put forward. Does anyone have any views on any further recommendations? If not, I think we're in a situation, are we not, John, where we're going to, I mean, does number 4 have to be a recommendation? We've acknowledged that it was an omission.
I'm happy to remove that, Chair, if committee members are.
I'm content as I proposed it, Chair.
Yeah, okay. And I've got officers' assurances that the comments I made about the wording is going to be taken on board. So therefore, we've got 3 recommendations here. and it could be that there's disagreement over option 3, recommendation 3. So are we going to vote on these individually, John?
I think it's up to you, Chair. Depending on the way I've reworded number 3, which appeared to be more acceptable to Councillor Wilding, but I think it's worth certainly testing his and Councillor Hewitt's views on that.
Thanks, John. I think what you've put there's good. So it's not actually saying we put in something that says absolutely no. So it conforms with what the officers were saying, but at the same time, it does sort of affirm how we feel about it.
Okay, are there any more recommendations?
I've got a comment there,
Yes,
Chairman.
Councillor Durkin.
I think the important thing about this document is to get it approved so that it can become a functioning document. So therefore, my question would be, would recommendation 3 put the approval of this document in jeopardy? Thank you.
I look to officers for their views. I don't see it as derailing the planning policy process, but I'll take their view on that.
I mean, my view is, as it's currently, as John's rewritten it, I think it's fine to state it as it is. If Kirsten might want to comment.
No, I'm happy with that. I think it makes clear Herefordshire's, as local councillors represent your position, but I don't think it should affect the soundness of the plan. Thank you.
Okay, and are all committee members happy to take all 3 recommendations in one vote?
Yeah.
Chairman, can I ask for an explanation here? Do we not need a recommendation to say that we're happy for the draft plan to go forward to consultation?
If you think that's appropriate, then make that a recommendation.
Well, I'm just asking the question as a new member. Yeah, I mean, surely we have to be explicit about that.
Yes.
But we seem to be getting into detail. By the way, I was going to intervene on the very point that Councillor Durkin had intervened on, and I did think that to make the fracking point more stronger would have made the report unsound. Happy to have recommendation 3 as a sort of statement, but I don't think it really adds anything to what we're saying as a committee.
Okay, noted.
There's just one last thing. I'm really sorry, Jonathan, but
no, go ahead.
So in policy W3, I need to ask, so when it says planning permission for livestock units, does this include prior notification and permitted development? Because there has been some confusion in the past between what permitted development is and whether it includes livestock units that are for intensive units. And I need to know whether for any, for prior, I expect you can't actually add it to prior notification or for.
Well, no, that's the purpose of prior approval and permitted development, is that they are standalone. So this is a policy for where planning permission is required through the planning application process. So I don't think it would bite on those examples that you give.
Just Chair, if I may, a point of clarification for Councillor Stark.
Yes.
I think it's certainly helpful to place on the public record that we endorse the report going forward for consultation. The next step for this report will be, as I understand, to go to Cabinet and then to full Council as a budget and policy framework item. So ultimately, what we say here is a recommendation, and we can state for the record that we endorse the report, but it will be for those next steps to determine.
Okay, happy with that, everyone? Okay, yeah. Are we now in a position to, and did officers want to comment on the last point that Councillor Hewitt made about permitted development?
I agreed with your review of the position. The plan can only deal with what requires planning permission, not permitted development and prior notifications. it's just out of scope for the plan itself.
Okay, and so unfortunately, Councillor Hewitt, we can't make a recommendation on that point. Right, are there any more recommendations? If not, are we in a position to vote on those recommendations? And whilst we're waiting for that to happen, can I just thank Victoria and Kirsten for their contributions today and for waiting so patiently whilst we swap the agenda items around, and your contributions have been really appreciated. And we thank you, Kirsten, for all the hard work in producing a policy document. It's not an easy task, and especially not with such a technical document as this that's supposed to last for 20 years. I don't know many policy documents that are expected to last 20 years, but there you go.
So, Chair, there are 6 members eligible to vote, and they can vote now.
All votes have been cast, Chairman, so I'll just bring everybody back into the room. All votes have been cast, and that is unanimously in favour of those recommendations, Chairman.
Thank you. And, thank you for that. And as I say, thank you to officers for participating and for Kevin Singleton's contributions as well. And we have now recommendations that we can go forward to Cabinet and the full Council for their deliberations in due course. Right, we now move on to agenda item 8, the work programme. And I draw members' attention to page 471 of the agenda papers. And that sets out some of the suggestions for scrutiny that have been received. And now we have to consider whether they warrant inclusion in the work programme. So we have the purchase of Maylord Orchards Shopping Centre and the repairs to the B4224 between Fownhope and Morderford from Fownhope Parish Council. Unfortunately, Richard Ball, the Director for Environment and Place, is no longer able to join us. So I look to committee members' views on the matter. But before I do, I am looking for some suggestions that have been forwarded to me from Richard Ball, which he says that if the committee is minded to discuss Fownhope issue, it may be that it's best to consider this once the works have been complete. So there's that suggestion. And then he also advises that the acquisition of Maylords has 2 aspects that you may wish to consider with regard to how well it is performing, and also with a view to a second issue, which would be the future strategy of how it may emerge through the town's fund strategy development work. So there's 2 thoughts there with regard to those items. So Councillor Durkin.
Thank you, Chairman. I think both of these items that have been put forward do merit review. I would take the point that the
Oh,
you better now?
I've had flu all week.
Oh dear.
Right. I think there is merit in the recommendation put forward by Mr. Ball regarding when it's completed. So I will be content with that. And with regards to mail-ords, I think that's something that needs to be examined now with the proposals for future use and proposals considered as part of it. They're my comments, Chairman, but they're both valid items that need to be investigated.
Included in the work programme. Okay, thank you for
Yeah,
that, Councillor Durkin. Any other views on that matter? Councillor Bowes.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Councillor Durkin. I think both are valid and should go forward for scrutiny, and I definitely think that we should look at the Found Hope Morderford once the work's complete, because we don't want to delay it any further.
Okay, right. Any other thoughts from committee members other than to add those 2 items to the work programme?
I think the timing of when the Maylord Orchard thing happens, I think we need to give it some time to do the work that it was proposed to do and then review it. So I would suggest, sometime into the new year, let the Christmas season go and see what the value added has been.
Okay, but we're all agreed in principle that they should both be added to the work programme.
Chairman, I also think that with regard to putting these into the future, we need to have some sort of cut-off date when we can consider the appropriateness of as was said about after Christmas. With regard to the B4224, at what point into the future, when the work's complete, do we do this? So what I'm saying is, let's not let it meander into the dim and distant future, but look at a cut-off date for consideration of actually carrying out the work.
Okay, so really what we're all saying is we have these 2 items included on the works programme, and then they're to be discussed as soon as possible, given the parameters. Councillor Stark.
We've got flooding and the pandemic in the work programme, but aren't we really talking about business continuity rather than just those 2 specific items? I know they've had huge effects on the way that the council's been able to operate, and I just wondered whether, rather than being specific about that, we look at what business continuity as a whole in terms of how the council plans it and copes with these pressures.
Yes, I mean the issue was to be discussed much sooner in June or late June or early July, but for various reasons the matter was delayed. But it's extremely important that they are discussed. But again, it is dependent upon the timetabling of all these issues, and I look to officers to provide us with the appropriate time for these measures to be, these items to be discussed. But as the work programme is set out, we're all happy that the contents of that work programme are appropriate. Yep, that's an agreement. Okay.
Agreed.
Do we need to make a formal vote on that, John?
Probably for the record, Chairman, if you could get somebody to propose and second it, and I think we could probably do that one on the voices. I'm just looking at Sarah to see whether that probably would be. Yeah, we'll look to do that one on the voices. Okay, so can I have a proposer for the work programme?
I'll propose it, Chairman.
Okay, can I have a seconder?
I second.
Okay, Vice Chairman, Councillor Bowes seconds. All in favour? Yep, that's unanimous. Right, it just remains for me to mention the date of the next meeting, which is not too far away. It's Monday, the 12th of October. And so therefore, I'd like to thank all committee members. Bit of a marathon, I'm afraid, but we've discussed some vital issues for Herefordshire. And so thank you for your participation. Thank you very much, and we look forward to the next meeting. And so can I now just confirm that the live stream will cease? Thank you.